Hello everybody, welcome into our latest live broadcast. It's Friday, 1 o'clock p.m. Arizona time. You know what that means. It's time for another live interactive video. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. Thank you to all the members. I see our friend Buster right in, just joining us now from Scotland with a 10-pound super chat. He says, hello to everybody, that the temperature in Edinburgh, 38 degrees Fahrenheit. Hey, we were down to about 43 degrees Fahrenheit last night here in Phoenix. And I understand it's pretty windy over there in Scotland, so stay safe, my friend. Oh yeah, he says there's a red alert for strong winds. Mark Gaines with a 10-pound super chat. Thank you, Mark, saying hello to everybody and welcome in. And thank you, my friend, for your continuous support and generosity. Both Mark and Buster, of course. Yeah, our friend Jamie McGregor out there in Scotland sent me a little video, a Facebook thing, you know, when you make a little video with your phone, of just listening to the wind outside of his house. Yeah, I hope you're not trying to sleep. Holy cow. We've had high winds here just the other day. In fact, I just had to clean all of the leaves and branches that fell in the pool. And then, of course, California's been having those high winds, which is fairly normal for Los Angeles to get those, so what they call Santa Ana winds. But we don't get them here or in Scotland. So something going on in the weather pattern. But in any event, stay safe. Try and stay indoors. It will blow over. I hope not literally. It will pass. All right. I'm just cracking myself up over here. Let's see. 3D Everything joining us. There's Fred Sunderman and John Paul Bacon. Frank Jimmy saying hello, and Luke Greenia. Phil Stodd. And we go all the way up to the top here. Doman 2000 joining us. Steve Costello just became a new member here. Welcome in, Steve. Thank you for joining our Members Tech Club. And remember, there are on Mondays, there are members only videos, or one video live every Monday, 1 o'clock this time, for members only. Those videos are not made public. They're just a more informal chat with the supporters of the channel that are the main reason I can keep making videos as frequently as I do, and with this type of content that we are, for the most part, paying for out of our own pocket. Now, Minisforum did send us the motherboard, but we have to populate our own RAM, we have to get our own cooler, power supply, case, and this is a really bizarre motherboard. We covered this in part 1, and I'm looking forward to building something that's, you'd almost think it was a mini ATX build. But this is a micro ATX, and I found the absolute smallest micro ATX case. You couldn't make it any smaller than this. Like, it's within millimeters of height, width, and depth. And I think this cooler is going to be too tall. Like, it is right, just a little too tall. So I think we're going to change the cooler. So I've got a new cooler here that's like 67 millimeters, really shallow. Will it keep the chip cool? I don't know, but it should fit in there. And I have this weird power supply. If you look on the back, I only have seen these power supplies in system integrated builds, like from Dell and HP and others, Lenovo. I didn't know there was a standard called Flex. So there's the ATX spec, ATX 3.0, 2.0. There's also small form factor, or SFF ATX power supply. They're not called ATX, they're SFF power supplies. Those are the ones you typically see me use on mini ATX builds. And then I just realized, I don't know how long these have been a standard, but these are called Flex power supplies. Much smaller than a mini ATX power supply, and about a quarter of the size of a regular ATX power supply. And this one's made by a company called Apevia, and it's got modular connectors here. So on this build, it should be rather straightforward in the sense that there's no RGB, there's no case window, there's no cable management. You basically hook up power to the motherboard, power to the CPU. You've got your power switch, and you have 2 USB 2s and 2 USB 3s, and an audio jack that also have to hook up to the board. And that's your cabling. That's pretty much it. So I'm hoping this goes well. You'll see one side of this case has holes on the side and the other side doesn't. That's the side that the CPU is going to obviously be facing so it can draw air in. But yeah, I'd never heard of a flex power supply before. I'm glad to see it's a standard. I still have, you know, PTSD from those long, narrow power supplies that are used in like the smaller like Dells and HPs, where they're like a tower, but they're much smaller, and they have these long, skinny power supplies, which you can only buy from Dell. Even the pinouts, Dell will make that proprietary, and you just can't go and get one from anywhere. In many cases, they're a Dell design. And the others do the same thing, HP and Lenovo. It's been going on. And every time I see them, I don't even try to find a knockoff. If a power supply is bad in one of those units, and if the unit's worth putting the money into, because a lot of them are very old now, I usually look on eBay and try and find one there. Although these days you might be able to find one at Amazon. Knowing that there is a standard that's really small, though, well, again, I don't know how long this has been around. This is my first experience with it, but I'm thrilled. I'm glad that there is such a standard, rather than what I was accustomed to was Dell and HP, Lenovo, all doing it differently. So this is very, very similar to that, but standard. Be nice if they switched over. In the meantime, let me go back to saying hello to the rest of everybody here. So again, welcome in Stephen to our tech club. There's Eddie Casanova joining us, along with Brian Madonna and David Graham saying hello. Scott joins us and says hello. And I also see Jonathan and Corey Silva saying hello. There's Bill Knott. "3D Everything" says hello. Bryce Hosking, Claudio Ventura, William Bird, Chris Dunn, Jason Wyrick says hello. Welcome in. Thomas Backenstow joins us and says hello. Charlie Purdy says hello, along with Rick Lakes. Rick joins us from Minnesota. There's our friend Planet Cryos with a $2 super chat. He's been pretty active on his YouTube channel. If you've not seen or checked out Planet Cryos' YouTube channel in a while, be sure and check it out. There's some great content there, and it's 15 minutes of video or so. So keep it up. Keep me entertained and informed, Planet Cryos. Thank you for your super chat. Bajan Guy says hello. Mark Leibowitz joining us. Mark runs a computer repair facility out of the Chicago area. It's always good to see another fellow tech joining us. Larry G says hello, and Martin Postema says hello. Lana Dro saying hello. Hello, everybody. VNB says hello from Belgium. I guess they had a storm there. That's over now. Paul Kitching is joining us and says hello, along with Gary Bickle. Kay Morton. A $10 super chat from our friend Charlie Purdy. Thank you, Charlie. He says hello to everybody. Welcome in. Welcome in. Kurt Schlegel says hello. Darren Gilholm. Did I get everybody? I hope I got everybody. Fred Sunderman joining us. Welcome in, Fred. He says it is 17 degrees Fahrenheit in North Haven, Connecticut. Ooh, that sounds a little bit chilly. So the last couple days, let me just tell you what's been going on. Oh, wait. Something else came in here. Andy Kane joins us and says hello. Mortant1210 says hello. Welcome in, guys. Nick Caffrey with a €10 super chat says hello to everybody. Another Irish survivor of storm. Is it Edwin? I don't know the name of the storm. I just know that there's a storm and it's rolling through Scotland right now, or at least a wind. Butch Sparrow says hello. Welcome. Welcome. I should wake up. Welcome in, guys. All right. What was I talking about? Already lost my train of thought. These shows are live and unscripted, if you couldn't tell. And I was going to go over here, pull this up. Oh, now I can see. And, oh my gosh. Right on my way to saying something really important, and now we'll never know. Peter Laycock in Scotland says they had gusts over 95 miles an hour recorded at 4th Fourth Road Bridge. Jack Hugelmas says hello from Toronto, where it's -6 degrees Celsius, which is about 21.2 degrees Fahrenheit. Yeah, it's wintertime. Oh, so I know what I was going to tell you about. So the last couple days, no videos, partly because, you know, every year between Christmas Day and about the middle of January, everything slows to a stop in my business. And I mean everything. This has been going on year after year after year. It's almost like clockwork. I can predict it. A lot of people who run computer repair in the past have told me, hey, does your business slow down around December? I'm like, no. Until the last week of December, I'm busy. In fact, I'm busier than ever. I don't know what you're talking about. But once that holiday hits, it's pretty quiet for the next 3 weeks, thereabouts. I can't tell you when it picks back up precisely, but it's right around the middle of January that things go back to normal. Well, things went back to normal pretty much on Monday, whatever day that was. Today's the 24th, so we were probably around the 19th, something like that. So about 3 weeks in, it's usually about the middle, so we're just a few days outside of the middle of January that I typically expect things to be slow. And everything hit the fan. I had different customers who I hadn't heard from in some time starting to reach out with problems they've never had before. And one of my clients, it turns out, owns another business I know nothing about. And I've been working with this customer for nearly 2 decades. And apparently he's owned this other business for nearly twice that long. And I'm like, why am I just now hearing? I had no idea he had any more than one business. And that business is a very large business with numerous locations. And, you know, I was never asked to be their tech, or I didn't even know the business ever existed. I don't recall it ever coming up in a conversation before. Well, that business was hit with ransomware. And I mean, they encrypted everything, and they deleted their backups in Acronis Cloud. Somehow they were able to get access to the machine that had Acronis on it that was apparently left logged in with no two-factor authentication, and they deleted the backups. So this company was out of every bit of data they've ever had in the entire history of the company. And so the owner had called me because their tech that they hired, I guess it's a direct employee, not a contracted service, or you could, you know, sue them, said, look, we're in a real pickle here. I thought I'd call you as a Hail Mary kind of a situation, right? A last ditch, help us Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're our only hope kind of thing. And I just thought, well, if the backups were deleted, they should be recoverable from Acronis. So let me put you in touch with Begowden. And at that time, Begowden was traveling, of course, so I couldn't get any immediate response. And the ransomware people wanted, I don't know how much money, but they had 72 hours to pay the money, or they'd release all the data they stole to the public. Oh boy. And apparently they couldn't figure out, you know, how to use the Tor browser, or, you know, how to get on the dark web. So they couldn't figure out how to pay this thing, just be done with it. And they didn't mention to me how much money it was, but they did contact the FBI and, you know, did everything the way they're supposed to. Begowden did get back to me and very kindly reached out to the customer at my request. And they have been going back and forth, and apparently they're now recovering data. I don't know how much data or how fast of an internet connection, but they found a computer that wasn't impacted and infected at another IP address that they're able to access their Acronis account and download the previously deleted cloud backup. But this is why you need to have backups, not only in the cloud, but also locally. And this is why I always tell you, disconnect your backup drive, your local backup drive, because if you get ransomware or a virus, it infects everything. The network, the server, every workstation on the platform gets infected. Anything you've got network access to without any two-factor authentication, or something that, like a Windows login, that if there's no activity, it times out after a certain period of time, 10, 15 minutes, and then you have to sign back in again. So if any of that had been in place, It could have reduced the amount of damage. Furthermore, I don't have all the information because their IT person never called me, although I invited them to call. If they had Acronis installed, Acronis has anti-ransomware built into it. So I'm a little confused, like how did ransomware get through unless they didn't have it installed correctly or they disabled that part of Acronis, which, you know, I don't recommend people do, because that's Acronis's big thing, is protecting your backup with blockchain and anti-ransomware. I mean, they're all over it. They're a leader in the space. So there's a lot of information I don't have, and it's just left to my imagination. But it also is not a company I maintained. It's a company I never even knew they had anything to do with. It's all like I was just blindsided with all this new information. And of course, I'm flattered they thought of me because they had nowhere else to turn. They were just out of ideas and didn't know what else to do. And even I, you know, not knowing what kind of equipment they're using, how they're backing up, how big the data set is, what the infection is, etc., how much the ransomware was, because sometimes it's just cheaper to pay the ransomware, learn your lesson, and lick your wounds and go on. At this point, it was spilled milk. We're crying over spilled milk. What do we do now to clean up that mess? And thankfully, from my perspective anyway, my understanding was Bowden was able to at least get their Acronis backup alive and then explain to them how to get to that safely. So, you know, a shout out, and that's over and above the Call of Duty, and that's included in the support for Acronis. There's no charge for that, which is, you look, this customer would have paid a lot of money, is all I'm saying. So I don't know that they're back up and running yet, but I still think they're in a recovery process. But they had no recovery process, right? They went from absolute, complete, and total loss to finally being able to get something back. I don't know how updated the backup is, but whatever it is, it's a lot more than they had. So we're on the right path. And then our friend Subaru Mike, we had disassembled his old computer, and I was setting him up with a mini PC, and then we had trouble getting our schedules to meet, so I finally got that over to him, and I haven't heard back yet, so we'll see what he thinks. What else? Another one of my clients had reached out. They're now much more concerned about backups given the Los Angeles fires, which finally, I was able to convince him. I've been trying to twist his arm for years to do this. Backup little 2 terabyte Samsung T7 SSDs. They're like $150, $140. Never been cheaper. Just buy one, plug it into the USB port of your computer. Let me connect remotely, copy the contents of the server over to that drive. That was nearly 1 million files. And that ran for about 10 hours yesterday, finished late last night. And then I instruct the owner to say, okay, unplug that backup drive, take it home, get it out of the building. If there's a fire, a theft, a flood, a virus, at least you have that backup. Now, granted, if he doesn't make that backup frequently, if he doesn't update it, and updating it's easy, just bring it back in, let me know, I'll connect remotely, do a file synchronization, and file synchronization just updates the files that have been updated, added, or deleted. It makes the change like a mirror onto the external SSD, and that'll go quick. It'll just compare the files it already has to what's on the server. What's ever been deleted off the server gets deleted off the backup. What's ever been changed on the server gets changed on the backup. Whatever's been moved from one directory to another gets moved. So we have an exact mirror. That happens much faster than the main full backup, that 10 hours. So now it'll only take like 20 minutes unless he waits 2 or 3 months to do it. Then it'll be 40 minutes or 60 minutes, depending on how many changes. But at least in a worst case, tragic, total catastrophe, he'll have something. Even if that something is 3 months old, that's better than a complete and total loss, which is basically where the other company was at. And the longer you're in business and you keep holding on to this data, the data set only gets bigger every day. How much bigger kind of depends on what your business is. Like if you're a photographer, probably gets a lot bigger every day. It depends on the work. Depends how many employees you have and how much work you do. Or it may depend on the time of the year. So for people that are doing taxes, right? They get really busy from January until mid-April. And the amount of data they add in those 3 months could be more than they've added the rest of the year. So with all that in mind, I always leave it to the business owner to make up their mind how frequently they want to bring that backup back in, and preferably rotate, bring one in and leave it there. Then I'll update it. You take that one home and switch it out for the one at home, and then leave that one there. Then I'll update it, and we just do this round and round. Every week, every day, every month. It's up to the customer how much they want to pay. And instead of automating it, because automation is great when you first set it up, but if you're not auditing it, how do you know the automation's working? Oh, I get a log file. No, a lot of times these issues with log files is that directories have been added that aren't included in the backup or changed. Something else has changed in time that the automation has not been updated to address. And so your backup is working, but it's not working complete. And then when you're going to find out, when it's time to recover, and you go, oh, I forgot. Or it's like, why isn't that there? It's like, well, when you set this up, it was different. So I do a combination of automated and manual, attended and unattended backups for my clients. What I do is I let them run automated on their schedule. And then no less than once a month, I manually do the update. And I always make sure the automatic update never deletes any files from the backup until I see it and approve that. So it'll mark them for deletion on the backup. So say somebody's deleted a directory on the server and they shouldn't have. I don't want the automated backup to immediately run and delete that off of the backup drive. So I just say mark it for deletion. The next time I check it on an attended backup, it'll show me a summary of how many new files and how many deletions. And if I see a bunch of deletions that draws a red flag, I don't go any further. I talk to the customer. Usually everything looks fine. There's a standard number of deletions. After you do this for a while with a customer, you get to know generally how much data they're adding on a weekly or monthly or whatever your update period is. You'll start seeing more or less. Oh, there's a gig new data. Oh, there's a gig new data. Oh, there's, 2 deleted folders or something that aren't that big. But if I see something that's a massive deletion, I talk to the owner and say, is this normal? Is this expected? They had a recycle bin that had 1.8 million files in it that took 90 minutes for me to empty. That's a situation where I go, this is bizarre. I am not going to empty this recycle bin until I talk with the owner. And what I learned in that case is there's an automated backup running two external SSDs. I don't know why, but it is. And I'm not, it's working, so I'm not going to bother. But what I did is, after I'd spent 90 minutes deleting those files, I checked it again about 2 months later, and we're back to 1.8 million files again. Or, 1.5 million, whatever. Not exactly the same, but still another 90 minutes to empty the recycle bin. And the reason it's taking so long is it turns out the recycle bin's not on the local fast NVMe. The recycle bin's on what the automated backup is doing on these external SSDs that run much slower. So I just went on the recycle bin and I said, don't put items in the recycle bin on drive D and drive E. If the employee deletes anything on drive C, that goes in the recycle bin. But whatever the heck is going on this backup software, it's too much for me to keep up with. I can't imagine they would be recovering anything that's a backup anyway, right? So what are the odds that they would have a failure on the main drive and a failure on the backup drive at the same time? So it's safe to me to just turn that recycle bin off, and then whatever that backup software is doing, if it's deleting these files in bulk like this, then it's moving them into the recycle bin. That's taking 2 times longer for that automated backup to process and complete. Whereas if we skip the recycle bin altogether, we cut the time right in half. And then I don't have to deal with it later or the problems that it amounts to later. And the other thing that I like to do is, for whatever reason, and there are reasons, most people don't get new network card drivers through Windows Update. They're just not presented to you. And there are a number of reasons for this. However, not that the customer was having any network problems, but as a computer technician, If I've got a client who has a number of computers in their office, and some of those computers may have Realtek cards, and some of those computers may have Intel-based network cards, I want them at the very least to all have the latest driver and the same driver. Even though they're not reporting any problems, I need consistency, and I need to make my life less stressful. So I'll log in remotely, I'll look at their device manager, I say, oh, this has the Realtek controller. I download the latest network controller driver from Realtek, not from anybody else. And then I update that. I can do that remotely. And it'll disconnect me when the network driver gets replaced and then reconnect me when it's back up and running and connect. You know, because when it replaces the network driver, it loses the network connection. And then it reestablishes it once the new network driver's in place. So you got to be patient, let that happen. Then I'll take that driver that I downloaded and I'll move it over to the server so I don't have to re-download it again on any other computers in that office that also have a Realtek network card. Then I see another one. It's got an Intel card. And I'm just looking at the dates on the drivers in the device manager, and they're all over the place. One's from 2019, one's from 2021, and this is what they got from Windows automatically, and it's working and there's no complaints. And that's fine. But again, when it comes to, hey, I'm having a problem, and I have to look and see what's different about their computer versus the other 9, 10, or 11, or 12 computers in the office, the more we can make the same, the faster the diagnosis happens. Because if they're having a network card driver related problem on one, and that same driver is used on others, then they should all be having the same problem at the same time. It's a much, much faster fix. Or if they're just having one computer with a problem, but it is also using the same network card drivers as everybody else, it's probably not network card driver related. It's a faster diagnosis, right? So that's the logic behind it. Moral of the story is, you should check your device manager. If you're using either a wired or wireless LAN, look for the latest driver. If it's Intel, go to Intel and get the driver from Intel. If it's Realtek, go to Realtek. If it's Qualcomm, if it's Atheros, if it's MediaTek, you go to those sites and you download the driver directly from them. This is especially important if you're networking computers, transferring files and sharing printers. If, on the other hand, you're just watching at home with one computer, it probably doesn't matter because your internet works and that's all that matters. We get into more complexities when it comes to having a network attached storage or some kind of file server, or you're communicating between two or more computers. Even if they don't have the same network card driver, that doesn't matter. We just want to make sure we have the latest network card driver from the network card manufacturer just to reduce the odds of having a problem later. You'll never know you avoided a problem, right? You'll say, well, I did that, didn't appear to do anything. Good. And hopefully it stays that way for a long time, because the alternative is waiting until there's a problem, having to spend time diagnosing it, eventually figure out, I'll try the network card driver, and then it fixes, and however much time you spent on that, ignorance is bliss if you would have avoided that whole scenario. Or, if it's working, leave it alone. This is a choice for you. But again, when I am maintaining customers that have multiple computers, and if they all run different drivers, this is a nightmare for support. So choose accordingly. And I don't use any third-party driver software. I simply, first of all, I'm not adding that crap onto the computer. You want to talk about resource hogs and bloatware. These are bloatware programs as far as I'm concerned. Any third-party software for drivers, it absolutely doesn't belong on the system. Just take it out. You should be able to find your drivers for free by yourself and not rely on a third party and with that much trust. Been in this business too long, man. And computers cost too much money to be giving away my resources for some free piece of driver software I could be doing myself. That's the epitome of either laziness or just an unwillingness to want to learn anything. So I don't run my business that way. You can do whatever you want. I don't care. But I want to share with you the perspective of how I run a business, because I assure you, it'll be good for you. It'll be in your best interest if you follow it. On the other hand, what you do wouldn't necessarily be in my best interest to follow when I'm held accountable for all of these machines, and I'm the one who's going to get the call, and I'm the one who's going to have to diagnose it. I'm the one who's going to have to repair it. My profit margin comes from basically on a retainer. A customer pays me a flat rate every month, and my goal is to do as little work as possible so my profit margin goes up. So I don't mind putting a little extra work in today so I don't have to have a surprise tomorrow. There's no guarantee, but it's definitely in my favor, the odds, that everything's going to run much more smoothly if I set a foundation that's solid and then just maintain it. And network card drivers don't have to be updated very often. You know, check it once every year, once every 2 years, you're good to go. But if you're going to check it on one machine, check it on all of them if you have multiple machines. Get it out of the way, it's done. And that's one less probable cause of an issue in the future. The network card drivers are updated for a reason. They didn't just do that just because. Do you want to wait and find out what the reason is? Don't let me get in your way. Whatever that reason is, I don't ever want to know. Just put the new driver on, get on with life. It's free, there's no software involved, and it only takes a couple minutes. All right, so let me get back over here to the chat room. Raj D renews membership. Raj is now a member for 22 months and says, hello, Carey and everyone. Welcome in. Raj, good to see you, my friend. Thank you for renewing your membership. There's Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How-To saying hello. Welcome in. Another great YouTube channel if you're looking for more tech, real tech content. Not only do we have Planet Cryos here, but also Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How-To. Bernard C. says hello, and Dan Nilsson joins us. Peter Laycock said he just had to reload his browser because it crashed. Yeah, it's still a live chat memory leak that is still... If you see that your browser crashes, it's because of the live chat, and it happens across all browsers as far as I know. YouTube's going to have to fix this. Someday, let's hope. Jack Kugelmis with a $5 Canadian contribution. Right on. Thank you, Jack. K. Cordius Technology and Sean Gallagher say hello. Welcome in, guys. Beach 65 and Michael Lavelle join us. Raven 4K says hello, and Andy Winbridge. Gil Garcia. And Nicholas Barlow says hello. All right, well, welcome in, everybody. Let's start the show. With all that out of the way, that's why there wasn't... Anyway, last couple days, back to business. And finally, I won't have to deal with that again until Thanksgiving. That's when everything gets really, really busy right up until Christmas, and then it just dies for 3 weeks. So now I've told you, you know what to expect next year. I don't have any control of it. It's just how it works, so I don't expect it to be any different. This case that we're working with today, this is the smallest micro ATX, and I want to emphasize micro, not mini ITX, micro ATX. And I don't know how well this is going to go. This is a pretty bare bones, basic. You couldn't get much more basic than this. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's simple. It's less expensive. It's not complex. It has everything you need and nothing you don't, but in the smallest package possible. It would not be possible in January of 2025 to put a micro ATX motherboard, in a case any smaller than this. It's almost like they took a micro ATX motherboard and they added 2-3 millimeters onto every side of it. Well, onto at least 3 sides of it. Same with the power supply. And then they built the case around that maximum size. So you can put a mini ITX in here and have much more room. But you still have that minimal cooler height, which means you're not going to be putting in anything that needs a liquid cooler like those enthusiast 7s and 9s, you know, Ultra 7s, Ultra 9s, or Ryzen 7, Ryzen 9s. They're not designed for this unless it's a mobile chip like what we have here from Minisforum. Let me see if I can find some links for you here in our video notes. If we take a look at, well, first let's start with this power supply. So this is a $50 power supply, a very reasonable cost. And the Amazon link for it's right here. And we've got the Apevia. It says ITX PFC, so they're calling it ITX, but it's called a flex power supply. So that's a new term for me, flex, or here flex ITX. Because when I look at normal ITX power supplies, they look like this. Let's go ITX PSU. Actually, it wouldn't be called ITX, it'd be called small form factor. So let's do that again. ITX, let's add, look at all these 3-letter abbreviations we're using here. They're usually these little square boxes. They look like a regular PC power supply, just really far away. But you can see this is quite a bit wider. I don't know what the dimensions are, but if you look at the end of this one, see if there's some other photos here. That's the back. Where's the front? Yeah. Well, I suppose that technically is the front. But as you can see, it's much, much thinner than a standard small form factor power supply. Little teeny tiny fan in there. And I don't know, I've only used a handful of Apevia products before. I haven't had any complaints, but I also haven't put them in any customer situations, right? Because I'm still kind of feeling them out to see if they're reliable. They seem to be a really good price. And when it comes to this flex form factor, everybody else is like twice the money. So I'm like, all right, well, I don't want to put that much into this. With regards to the motherboard, if you missed part 1, we talked about the uniqueness of this board in that it's kind of built with a combination of laptop and desktop parts. And I like that they didn't crowd the motherboard in the way that a lot of other manufacturers, you know, you see motherboards on other channels, even on this channel, and they're just populated from edge to edge, which is all well and good, don't get me wrong. But this one, there's so much space of just nothing, like particularly in the corners, and it spaces everything out so you're not cramming all this heat into a smaller board, right? This gives it room literally to breathe. And of course, you got room for a big graphics card in here, and it's really intended for gaming. This is a Ryzen 9 7945HX, and instead of in the ITX form factor, it's in the micro ATX form factor, which is a bit bigger. I do have some concerns that we're not going to be able to keep this chip cool. I certainly know we couldn't if it were a desktop CPU, but as a mobile CPU, maybe, because it's lower wattage. If we can't keep it cool, I will not be able to keep it in this case, and we'll use this case for something more along an i3 or Ryzen 3 type of a machine, because you really can't go much more than that. But I'm hopeful, because this is a mobile chip, that we'll be able to keep it cool. And then getting back over to my video description here, let's go back over to, we have the links for the NVMe drive and the RAM that we use to prep this board. And the cooler that we've got is too tall. We're going to take that off. We've got a different cooler here, which does not appear to be in our parts list. We'll have to update that. So the PC case, let's talk about that first. Very inexpensive case. Remember, it's a very basic case, which is exactly what I wanted for this build. No case window, no RGB, really no cable management, because you don't need it. You just a handful of cables and you're done. It should be a really easy build. It's got a 5% off coupon. It's selling for $55. Not the fastest shipping, okay, but you know, I wasn't in a hurry. It's all metal. There's no plastic on this. This kind of shows you the fitment, and that if you do put 2.5-inch or 3.5-inch drives in this, you will block your ability to plug a graphics card in because the case isn't thick enough. So that's why we're just sticking with NVMe, which I would do anyway, quite frankly. And then if you need more space, just plug in an external USB drive. It's so old-fashioned to want to put drives in a computer these days. Unless it's a file server or a NAS, I just feel like, yeah, that's the way we used to do it. But there's reasons why we don't do that anymore, a lot of them. Some of which you might have missed earlier in the show if you're just joining us. All right, so anyway, it's a great price, and it's all metal. And I think they have a couple colors, maybe? I don't know, maybe not. Yeah, this looks like maybe something similar here, maybe not. I've never seen a micro ATX case this small before. So it's 7.3 liters, which is very, very small. I've seen mini ATX cases that are bigger than this. And this is a micro ATX. I can't emphasize that enough. It's just hard for me to picture how this is going to work in my mind. Now, with regards to the cooler, we have a cooler here called an AXP 120 that is 67 millimeters tall, and that's made by Thermalright. And I'm not sure. I've heard good things about Thermalright, but you can see this fan and heatsink are much thinner than the one that we put on here from Up Here. That's the name of the company, Up Here. So I've ordered this cooler. This is $36. Again, the power supply was $50. Minisforum sent us the board for review, but we purchased RAM and storage to put in there, and of course we've got the case. So overall, I mean, it's a $480 motherboard plus another, say, $300 between the RAM, NVMe, case, and power supply. So with tax, we're under $900, and you've got a Ryzen 9. I mean, throw a low-profile 4060 in that bad boy, and you got yourself a nice portable gaming machine. But of course, I'm not interested in doing that. But I'm putting some ideas in your head, planting some seeds. So let me go back over to camera 1 here, and now that you've got an explanation of why we purchased and what we purchased, this is all new to me. This type of motherboard design, I've never seen this before. This kind of case, never seen it before. Thermalright coolers, I've never installed a Thermalright cooler of any model. And the flex power supply, that's a whole new standard I've never ever dealt with before. So everything about this is a new experience for me, and I hope for you. And it should be very similar to how we build any other computer. But let's find out. It was funny, I was talking to our friend Mitch Morrison last night, and he goes, I know you don't like working on those mini ATX. I said, this is not mini ATX. And the reason I don't like working on mini ATX is everything's super tiny. It's really hard to get your hands into places. You got cooling issues. Yeah, they look great, don't get me wrong. And we have seen some big mini ATX cases, like Thermaltake's Tower 100, T100 case. It's one of the biggest mini ATX cases I've ever, or Johnsbow, or Segatep. Those were big mini, and those were easy to work on. But when we talk about the vast majority of mini ATX cases, like the Ncase M1 or the NZXT, is it the 510? Some of these are real tight fit, and you have to get a little creative in how you're going to get your cables to fit on the connectors when there's a big case wall between you and it. It's doable, but it's difficult. And then you always, potentially have all these heat problems because you're dealing with a much smaller case. And I was explaining to Mitch, a lot of these things have RGB. Some of these little mini ATX cases, you can put a liquid cooler on. That's what I don't like. I said, so I'm really looking forward to this because it's new to me. Everything about this is a new experience. And one of the first things I want to do, by the way, I could be wrong and absolutely hate this process. But no, I wasn't like, oh, I've got to do that. I was like, oh, this is going to be fun, or at least interesting and different. So we're going to start by taking the panel off here. And my debate was initially, not knowing or ever seeing this case before, is it possible for me to just change this fan out to a skinnier fan, and will it fit? Or just buy a whole different cooler? This cooler, I think, is 93 millimeters in height, and this one's 67. So for Americans, 6.7 centimeters versus 9.3 centimeters. And is it going to be that close that it's only just the fan I could swap out, just change the fan? And then I thought about it, and I said, well, what if I'm wrong? I'm buying a $20 fan, a $30 cooler, because we're live. I need to have everything. And then what do I do with the stuff that's left over? I'll just switch to cooler. So this cooler should absolutely fit. And this one, I know it's not going to fit, but I don't know if just changing the fan would be enough. So that's how I came to my conclusions and decisions, which could be completely wrong. And I used reviews on this case to help guide me. Like, what coolers are other people using? Certainly there's got to be a review here where someone mentions. What's interesting is a lot of people will mention, oh, I put this motherboard in this CPU in this case, but they don't talk about what cooler they used. Now again, I'm not reading any documentation. I'm just going to try and figure out how this all comes apart, as always. And the edges of this case, it's pretty sharp. It just ran up against the top of my hand and it didn't cut me, but it felt like it wanted to. All right, so there's our first panel, and then inside, pretty basic. I think this piece here doesn't really need to go back in. This would hold 2.5-inch or two 2.5-inch drives or one 3.5-inch drive, and it's going to go on the inside of it. But in doing so, you can't add any cards in here. You're going to sacrifice one for the other. So if we're not using this, apart from maybe some added flexible support to keep it rigid, I really don't think it's necessary based on what I'm looking at. Again, I'm making a lot of assumptions at this point, just based on my experience. I could be wrong, and that's why we film live and unscripted, so we can see how I got to my logic and whether or not I was right or wrong, and then we learned through that. Now these are going to be recessed screws, so I want to make sure that we set those aside. Those are different from the case cover screws, case panel screws, that are a rounded pan head, but they're all Phillips driver, and there's 2 screws on this and 1 screw on this side, for a total of 3. I'm used to everything being symmetrical, 2 and 2, but that's all it is, just a flat piece of metal. Now inside we've got our front port umbilicals and a little bag of screws right here, and we'll take this wire tie off and get these out of the way. So the first question is, oh, they give us an extra standoff, they give us screws for mounting the board and potentially any drives. There's our USB 3, there's our USB 2. This is front port umbilical power switch, hard drive LED, power LED, no reset switch. I'm fine with that. Audio header. That's it. That's all there is. This should be a breeze. So here's the first thing I want to know. First of all, are the standoffs pre-aligned? And secondly, how tall is this compared to the case? So we're going to set this in here and find out right now, because I've been wondering ever since this case arrived. This is going to be an extremely tight fit. I mean, they didn't give any room for error here. Okay, I see a standoff here and here. I see one, okay, here and there, and then 1 and 2 and 3. So I have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Don't worry about where they are. Not worried about location. I want to see how many pre-installed standoffs we have, because if there's 8, we're going to have a grounding problem. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So right out of the box, we're meeting the micro ATX standard, and these don't come out. What they do have instead are, let's see if we can get you closer on this. If you can see the height, these are full-size standoffs. They're sort of fixed in position. They don't come out. These down here, these are points at which you can add standoffs optionally if your motherboard requires them. If you were to put a mini ITX motherboard in here, you'd only use 4 screws in the corner. You'd go 1, 2, 3, 4. And you would leave this one and all these at the far edge. You would leave those standoffs because they don't come out. And if you try and take them out, you'll break them off and you'll never be able to put them back on. Unless you're really good with a a low power welder, I suppose. So we know the case fits in there. So now the second question I have is if I put this motherboard back in, I got to go this way first. Line up our standoffs. Look how much taller the fan is from the case. It's quite a bit taller. So I already knew that was going to be an issue, just basic math. I think the case will hold up to, well, I'm sure it said on the Amazon page, I think it was around 8 centimeters. This is over 9, and then our low profile Thermalright CPU cooler is 6.7. So just doing the math, that should fit fine. So the first thing we have to do, now that we've got the case prepped, we got to get this cooler. This cooler here needs to be removed. So that didn't stay on there very long, did it? But we'll put it back up on a shelf. You never know when we might need a low profile cooler. And now I got to remember how I remove it. Let's see. First, I guess we unplug it. And then we'll take these fan buckles off. And this cooler performed fine. It was okay. Chip ran a little bit warm when it was stressed, but it was within reason. It's okay. Didn't blow me away, no pun intended. They included a screwdriver, and now I can understand why. Because to take this cooler off, we need to go through the 2 holes, one here and one right there and one right there. Very hard to see on camera. That are just gaps in the fins. And I can't remember what I did with the screwdriver, but I think my regular JIS driver will probably do the job. You know what? I probably put the screwdriver in the box. Anyway, this is a super easy removal. Hey, Mara. Yeah, that's a weird installation method. We'll take that off of there. Sometimes it's hard to tell if you've got the screws all the way out, so I'm just lifting up on the heatsink as I turn the screws, so gravity doesn't trick me. Yeah, would you mind grabbing me a paper towel, please? Yes. What's my malfunction? Oh, I'm not on the screw head. That'll... You guys might see that better than I can. So the screwdriver, when it goes down, I can't see where it's going. There we go. So you can see our thermal pattern on the bottom of the cooler. It takes up all of the cooler, but doesn't take up all of the CPU. And that's normal, and that's why we apply the thermal compound here instead of here, or there'd be a lot of mess right there. Don't go too far. I need you to... Would you grab the Q-tips and the isopropyl alcohol there? That's... Yeah. Can you just set those here for me? Would you? Of course. And then, so what I do when I clean up thermal compound is I don't waste Q-tips and alcohol on getting the bulk of it off. Just grab a paper towel, save yourself. Save yourself the harder work. Get that mostly cleaned off, and then the same here, same thing. And I'm not going to worry about cleaning this one off until I go to reuse it at some point in the future, whenever and if that day comes. So just wiping it with a paper towel is all it needs. As long as I'm getting all the thermal material up so it doesn't leave any thermal material on my shelf or wherever I decide to store it. You can see all that stuff coming off. I still have a little more residue. Just turn this around the other way and use the other side. So you gotta put a little elbow grease in there. Oh yeah, that's working. Would you toss that? Careful, don't get that stuff on you. Thank you. All right, nice and clean. Good enough for storage. And, well, you know what? Let's keep it over here. And then these brackets come off. Let's go back over here to camera 1. Now, the screws that are used here are not standard screws. You want to keep all of this stuff with the cooler. If you're going to reinstall this cooler in the future, you definitely need all the same parts you used the first time. Okay, so the brackets, the standoffs, the screws, and the back plate all stay with this cooler. So you can grab a Ziploc bag so you don't lose it and keep it all together. Grab a Sharpie marker if need be, and just write down, you know, this is my up here low profile cooler parts for Intel. And then I still have the bags of parts for AMD chipsets. Super easy, barely an inconvenience. Speaking of which, Mara, would you mind grabbing me a small Ziploc bag? Would you mind grabbing me a small Ziploc bag so I can put these parts away?
Like screws and stuff?
This, I need it to at least be able to fit something this big. So like a sandwich size bag would be great. Thank you. And while she does that, I'll clean the top of our heat spreader here. And as I mentioned, if you didn't see part 1, this is an AMD CPU, but the spacing is for, you know, these holes around it is for a socket 1700 Intel cooler. It's not the first time we've seen an AMD chip with an Intel cooler. There was a manufacturer that did this quite a long time ago. Thank you.
You're welcome.
But I completely forgot about it. So when I saw this, I said, wow, what a unique design. And then I realized, wait a minute. They've, not Minisforum, but another manufacturer, before Minisforum was even a company, even a thing, had come out with a, I want to say it was a socketable AMD. It was an Athlon XP or one of the Bulldozer, maybe it was an FX chip that took an Intel cooler. So that's pretty unique. I'm not exactly sure what the logic was. I mean, if you're using an AMD chip, why not use an AMD cooler? But there's got to be some reasoning in there. Maybe I'll have to ask Minisforum if I remember, just to wonder, why'd you do that? There might be some explanation on the Minisforum page for this motherboard. And again, all the parts for everything we're using in today's build are all listed in the video notes below this video. I keep pulling up more and more stuff. Wasn't expecting that. Usually the paper towel takes enough off that anything remaining is pretty minimal. And this doesn't have to be perfect. As long as we get the bulk of it off of there. You know, we're just going to slap some more thermal compound on it anyway. Okay. Just try not to stain my desk. All right. Let me just put this away for a minute. And then we're gonna, again, we're gonna reuse this cooler at some point for something. I have no idea, but we build enough systems every year. Sooner or later, I'm gonna need a low profile cooler, and that's gonna be perfect for some unknown future build. I don't necessarily need to put the fan in there. And then this is the, I'm going to write Intel. Yeah, good luck reading that. That's all right. I can read my own writing. And we'll take this and this. Oh, you know what? I better put the fan buckles in here too, because I'll lose them. So one fan buckle and 2 fan buckle. Okay, now let's get this off my workbench so we have some space and I don't confuse my parts. When you're dealing with coolers, they use a lot of very similar parts that are not compatible with one another. So we just want to make sure. I'll just step over here, put that over there. And you know what? I'm going to grab these, get rid of these, so I don't worry about the rubbing alcohol staining my workbench. Once we get Studio C set up, I'm going to have a little trash can by me, but in the meantime, I just have to walk off camera. That's okay. It's okay. Set this over here for now. All right. And then the screws for the case, I'm going to move those everything over to the left so I don't likely knock it down. All right, here's our first experience with the Thermalright. If you look on Amazon at Thermalright coolers, or even look on YouTube for reviews of Thermalright coolers, they're about half the price of everybody else and supposedly work as well. I hope that's true. I'm not opposed to a good value. It's boxed nicely. That's going to have all of our mounting parts, cardboard, documentation. I don't know, some warranty or something. I was hoping to get this in black, but no one's going to see it anyway. So it's this weird green, sort of an olive or drab green. But look how much thinner this fan is. This is, I would say, nearly half the thickness of the one on the other cooler. And then back in the box, we've got some foam. Oh boy, that's thin. Sometimes these are referred to as pancake style. One, two, three, four, five, six, 8 pipes. We've got the piece of plastic here covering this polished area for the thermal contact, a thermal compound contact. So we'll keep that on until we're ready to actually install. And we do have 3 holes in the heatsink, just like the other one. That must be how we secure this down. At least 2 of them anyway. Yeah. I don't know what the middle one is used for, other than maybe well, I guess the documentation will explain it, but it appears to separate the heatsink from the there's a bracket here, and that seems to secure the bracket on, and the bracket's what secures the heatsink on, and that all fits into the backplate, whether it's AMD or Intel. In some cooler designs, you have to put this bracket on yourself, but I like that it's pre-attached. So we're going to have a very, very low profile cooler, just if we can imagine that. In fact, let's take that imagination a step further. Before I go through this effort, everything that I've put together in my mind is just visualized, but it's important we check it in reality. In theory, if all my math is right and there's no surprises, we should be able to fit the board and the cooler in here and still be able to put the back panel on. So let me start first of all by just dropping the board in here. And it is weird to me that the narrow side of the board has the I/O rather than the long side, which is what we're used to with regular normal ATX and micro ATX designs. But in this case, the short end, well, one of the short ends, it's got to go this way first. You do notice how I hold the board against heat sinks and edges, that I don't grab it like a sandwich. And that's how I don't have, that's why I don't have to worry about wearing an anti-static wrist strap or anything like that, because there's nowhere for static to go other than to heat sinks or, you know, grounded areas that don't have any delicate components if you're not touching the delicate components. But hey, if you want to wear an anti-static wrist strap, I'm not suggesting you shouldn't. It's just not for me. All right, let's see if we put this in here now. Oh, it's going to be hard to tell on camera just how tight that fit is. Let me get all these cables pushed down, because before I do the work, I just want to seat it. I don't want to secure it, but this is what it's going to look like when it's secured, right? It's going to, well, not look like, but how it's going to sit. And then the question is, will this panel go on? My math says yes. Oh boy. I don't think anything's pushing up on the panel. It's just that there are tabs and slots. Oh, it's only one tab. And once I line that up, there it goes. Oh my goodness. That fan is just right on the other side of these holes. I'd pick it up, but it's all going to slide out. I haven't secured it yet, but at least now I know we're good to go with cooler install. That should then allow us to fit the motherboard in with the power supply, hook up the cables, we're done. It's that easy of a build. I just hope that cooler will keep that Ryzen 9 cool, but it is, again, a mobile Ryzen 9. And when I say keep it cool, I don't mean for like everyday use. It'll be fine for everyday use. I mean, if we slam on it with some resource-intensive application like Cinebench, how's it going to perform? And there's two different answers to this. One, it might perform fine. But two, maybe don't build a computer like this if that's how you intend on using it. These mobile platforms, these ones that are really small form factor, they're going to, be fine for normal use. And they'll be fine if you crank them up from time to time. But if you're cranking them up hours at a time, day after day, you're probably killing it. Like you've underpurchased. You've bought a hammer, but you're using it like a sledgehammer. You're probably going to break that hammer much sooner. So this would not be the right tool for that, regardless if the CPU cooler can handle it or not. Your expectation should be default, probably not. And if it does, that's bonus. If it's not bonus for you and it's required, you're going to need to get something a bit bigger that has better cooling if you want that level of CPU, or drop your level of CPU, which means those big intensive resource tasks are going to take longer, but then you're not going to have the heat issue. But then if you get the really faster CPU that uses more power and gets hotter, and it starts thermal throttling, then it's going to take longer than if you would have just spent less and bought the mid-range one. To begin with, that's not overheating. Just have reasonable expectations. I'm hopeful that this will be fine, but just in case it isn't, I'm prepared to move this into a different case. And so should you. Again, I cannot express how important it is to have reasonable expectations. This machine will perform exactly the same for you as it does for everybody else. But if that's not good enough for you, that's not the machine's fault. You bought the wrong thing. So just putting the blame where the blame goes. And we chalk it up as a lesson learned, and we move on and don't make that mistake again. All right, I'm going to move this over here. Get this out of the way. What are we saying in the chat room here? Mats Olof joining us from Sweden. Welcome in, Mats Olof. Becca Cameron says, slim fast. That's funny. Becca Cameron says, time for Gatorade. You know what? Thank you for the reminder. Feeling a bit parched, as Mitch would say. There we go. Come on, Gatorade. Sponsor me. tired of sponsoring them. Well, we have a very active chat room today. Love it. Dwayne Blackwelder renews his membership, now a member for 26 months. He says, hello, everyone. It's been a couple of weeks since I was last able to catch a live stream. Great to be here. Well, thanks for joining us. You're catching a good one, Dwayne. They're all good. But this one, very different. I'm super excited to do this. This is my super excited face. No, I am. I genuinely am super excited. And that genuinely is my super excited face. Let's see. Scrolling. There's a $2 super chat from our friend Planet Cryos. He says he pre-ordered the S25 Ultra. Gotta have it. I was going to order the S25 until I saw it's basically the S24 with a slightly more powerful processor and a more megapixel camera. And maybe a little tiny bit thinner? I don't know. There's a part of me that wants it because it's new, and there's a part of me that says it doesn't make any sense. I mean, if I had an S22 or an S23, it skipped over the S24. If you've already got an S24, why bother? I mean, that seems like such a minor little thing to pay full price for a brand new phone. And in my mind, I'm thinking, yeah, but I get a new battery. But it's the same, I think it's the same battery. So it doesn't really feel like anything innovative. It just feels like they changed the paint color and said, it's a new model. A little disappointed in Samsung. I was expecting more. I might change my mind. You let me know when you get yours. And tell me what you think and what you're upgrading from. Specifically, if you have an S24 now, so I don't think you're going to see any difference in it at all, other than the one in your wallet. All right, let's see what this installation kit looks like. Robert Kachner joins us and says hello. Hey, there's Mitch Morrison joining us. Planet Cryo says with another $2 super chat, by the way, thank you. He says, I hear you on that. I have the S22 Ultra. Okay, S22 to either S24 or S25 is probably an equivalent upgrade. So why not do the S25? Unless the price on the S24 is significantly less now because of the S25. Unless you care about a millimeter of thickness difference, like I don't, it's your decision. Or the colors, right? Oh, there's new colors now. Oh, yay. I'm just going to put a case around it. You can't see the color anyway, but Mara says he will change his mind. You know what? Never say never. It's happened before. I'm very happy with my S24. If you could say, hey, no matter how happy you are with it, would you like to be happier with the S25? Yes. But if the S25 is pretty much exactly the same, from my perspective, I don't think I'm going to be any happier. I'm going to stay at the same level of happiness and think, I just spent money I didn't need to spend. So I could change my mind and then, regret it later, but, that wouldn't be the first time. Gee, I wonder if it has any more AI stuff. So there's a new, first of all, if you have an Android phone, do check for updates. There will be releasing the new, what do they call it, the One interface or something. They're on version 6, they're going to version 7. Apparently that makes a bigger difference to your phone than the S24 to the S25 does. And I don't think that's out yet. I don't have all this memorized, guys, but essentially that's the gist of it. And I kind of feel like when that new Android version comes out and goes on the S24, it's going to be just like having a new phone. And that's free. Planet Cryos with a $5 super chat. He goes, here's to Maralina to change his mind tonight. I think we'll wait and see what other people say after they get them, right? Because they're only available for pre-order right now. there's no sense in ordering it today or next week. It's not shipping until next month, so. Thank you, Planet Cries. Okay, so we've got some brackets, we've got some thermal compound. Let's hope the thermal compound is in better shape than that thermal compound from Alzai. These brackets, I don't know what they're for. Here's our back plate. We have 2 fan brackets. Why would we have 2 buckles? It's not like you can put another fan on there. One has a piece of paper on it. What does that say? Time for my glasses so I can see. It says fan clip. Great. Thanks for explaining that to me. They're taped together. What is this? Oh, whatever these are, they're much more bent, almost like a parenthesis, and these are more straight. All right, well, that's going to have to be a documentation answer because I can't even imagine why. We've got blue and black standoffs or spacers. One says for socket 115X Intel. Well, it doesn't say Intel, but you know if you see 115X 1200, that's Intel. Blue is 1700. This is a socket 1700 mounting spacing. So we want these blue ones. Where's my skizzers? Okay. We're going to want these brackets out of here. I'm sure one set's for AMD and one set's for Intel. Maybe they've got something written on them that tells us that. Thermal compound. Ah, yes. These little kidneys here, these are for AMD sockets. So we're not using those. So those can go right back in the bag. Just helps me clear my work area from choices. We know we don't need any more from here, so that'll go in there. This says the red spacers and screws are for sockets AM4 and AM5. That is Intel. I mean, what is it? AM is short for AMD. I don't know why I said Intel. And then the other half of this bag contains screws and standoffs, or thumb screws and standoffs. So I'm going to assume we need everything out of there because I don't see any other. So we'll dump this out as well. There we go. Then this bag, again, this is for AMD. This will go in here. We're not building with AMD. More trash. This is for the motherboard mounting. Keep that in there so I don't confuse myself. Empty box. These brackets will be used for Intel. And we're using this. Okay. Now it's time to see what those fan buckles are for. Documentation is all pictures. I like that. One is a 15 millimeter fan clip and one is a 25 millimeter fan clip. I still don't understand. We only have one fan. Why would we? I don't even know. I mean, the instructions say secure the fan with the fan clips, but 25 millimeter fan clip, 15 millimeter fan clip. The fan should be the same distance from side to side. So, are they referring to the height? I am absolutely baffled right now. There's smoke coming out of my head as I'm trying to imagine what those are used for? Because the fan clip connects to the heatsink, that's never going to change, regardless if it's Intel or AMD. Oh, the other side has the documentation in Chinese. So apparently it's one page of documentation in English and the same page repeated in what is maybe Mandarin or Cantonese. I don't know. We're just going to say Chinese. 25mm versus 15mm fan. Why am I reading the Chinese side? Weird. Well, I guess we're just going to figure it out when we get there. I'm just looking in the chat room to see if somebody can explain that to me, because I don't have a clue. All right, so in theory, we take our back plate, and this back plate does say for socket 115X 1217XX, and that's going to go on underneath here. And you'll see there are holes in the back plate where the screws for the CPU bracket fit through there. And I'm going to guess, what keeps the back plate from bending down? Is that what these little washers are for, maybe? I don't know. Let's see. Let's take another look at the diagram. Maybe in English. Let's take a look at the English side. For Intel socket 1700, okay, that's just this one page. 6 steps, one page. Put the bracket down, install the Intel backplate, then place the plastic standoffs from the front side of the motherboard. Okay, that makes more sense. What it wants us to do, at least my interpretation of these directions, is we're going to find these, is it these screws here, these really long ones? Wasn't paying attention to that detail. Which screws do they show here? Backplate. Yeah. Yeah, that's what it shows. It shows these long screws. And it wants us, from what I can see here, is to place the screw in there and then put the washer on it. So we put the screw fits, it's got like a hex end below the head of the screw. So that way the screw doesn't spin on you when you're tightening it from the other side. And that little spacer, it fits on tight, it holds that screw in place so it doesn't fall out. That little washer. It also prevents the edges from bending down as you're tightening and then making contact with your board. So that's what I was curious about, because this is a raised area. When it sits on top of it, then when you tighten down the corners, you could bend this frame, and if that happens, it won't work properly. So we're just going to, also there's 2 positions that this screw can fit in, here and towards the outside edge. But I'm not sure which one of those we want to be in. I'm thinking towards the outside edge. And it does look like they've given us a spare standoff here. The washer on there. Lock that bad boy in. That's a good design. I gotta say, I don't mind that one bit. And you should rotate the screw until it sits into its proper recess here. Like I said, the screw has like a nut pattern at underneath the head, so it can lock into the cutout in the metal. and then you can't spin the screw. That way, as you're tightening from this other side, you don't have to get a screwdriver back here to hold that from turning. So again, I think, and I don't know which way I put it on, but I think we go to the outside edge on this. There we go. That just sat in there. There's a lot of litigation regarding one mounting mechanism matching somebody else's design. So you'll find that these coolers often have their own unique way of attaching them, so they don't have to pay royalties to another company, or they end up getting sued. And you'll find, however, the way one company does it, they'll do that across the board with the vast majority of their coolers. Otherwise, they have to keep recreating and reinventing new mounting techniques that are different enough that if they were to go to court over it, you know, they can present to the court that they are not an exact duplicate, that there's enough of a difference. I think there's got to be a certain percentage of difference. I think this one right here, this was, I think, the first one I put on. And I think I moved it to the inner position instead of the outer one, so it's not lining up correctly. Wow, that little washer's on there pretty tight. I don't need to take it all the way off. I just need to be able to lift the screw, move it to the outer edge, and slide that back up. And now, hopefully, that will just fit perfectly. And it do. Right on. It looks pretty happy. Now, I'm not too worried about it fitting all the way flush, as long as when I tighten it down, it'll squeeze it in. It's good. So the next thing it wants us to do is it wants us to use these blue standoffs here, and to just place them, and sometimes they fit tightly one way or the other. These don't seem to care. They go on loosely either way. That one actually fit differently than the others. Wonder why. Same screw. I don't know why that one would be different. We may never know. And then these brackets. These are your Intel brackets with the screw up in the center. That needs to point up so that the heatsink has something to attach to. Now the question is, do you put the brackets on this way? We know that that screw has to face up. So do we put it on this way, or do we put it on this way? So depending on which way you want your, maybe not, maybe you don't have a choice. How do they show going on? They show the heat pipes on the opposite side of the RAM. So they show this going on this way in the photo. And if this is on, it gets in the way of these heat pipes if it's on over there. So if we move this here and move this one, when we face it towards each other, over there, that's weird. Anyway, so now those heat pipes can fit in the space between, and that's how the picture shows that cooler goes on. So our heat pipes are going to be over here by our I/O shield. And then we're going to secure this down to that screw and that screw. What I'm a little curious about is the fitment here. Looks a little sideways. there's a lot of play. I suppose it doesn't matter. Because despite the play in this, when we tighten it down with the thumb screws, as long as these posts will line up with the screws on the heatsink and it secures down, that's all that matters. But I haven't seen brackets fit that loosely on a cooler before. And, you know, maybe that's a sign of a less expensive cooler. Maybe they just don't make them with that much precision, or maybe they don't bother because it doesn't really matter. You know, there's stuff technical people do that doesn't need to be done. They just do it because they're technical people. Whether or not it makes any real difference in reality doesn't matter to people like that. They just say, well, that's how you do it, and that's how we're going to do it. They don't often question why, other than because that's how you're supposed to. I don't know. I like to understand why I'm doing things. And let me just make sure that I'm putting the brackets on correctly. It's 2011. Yep, they are showing the brackets going on across from the RAM, not in front of it. And again, for clearance issues, you might find out why if you don't do it the way they show you. And then they suggest putting the thermal compound on. So for that, I need my rubber glove. Well, it's a nitrile glove. Powder-free. It's not sterile. It's not for medical use. It's for working on stuff, dirty stuff, keeping your hands clean. So let's do that. And this is probably the most time-consuming part of it, and only because I've never done one before. Like, after you do your first one, anything else should be pretty straightforward once you know what to expect and get an idea for that specific manufacturer's mounting technique and the way that they explain their directions. Some directions are more helpful. So remember, we don't put thermal compound down on this because this is massive. We're going to put our thermal compound just underneath here, because that is the surface area of where these two meet, and anything outside of this area is just mess and waste. So normally you'll see me apply this to the CPU side, but normally we're not dealing with a mobile chip. Okay, that's coming out pretty good. I don't know how much of this I need. That kind of feels like the right amount to cover that amount of space. Ooh. Oh, it's dry. Yeah, I can't. It's all on the, literally every bit of that came off on my finger and nothing remained on the heatsink. So guess what? That is bad thermal compound. It's expired or just wasn't manufactured properly. Let me get rid of this. And thankfully, we have our own thermal compound, ironically or coincidentally, left over from a competing cooler manufacturer. Thermal compound should spread easily like an oil-based paint, like a thick paint. It should not ball up like clay. That suggests the compound was either mixed wrong or has sat for too long. Regardless of why, it's not acceptable. And if you're going to take your time to build your system, build it right. Don't say good enough. If you're the kind of person that says good enough, you wouldn't work for me. Not for very long. If it takes a few more minutes to get it right, so be it. If you don't even want to play around with the manufacturer's thermal compound, just buy whatever thermal compound you want and take whatever was included with the cooler. And this is especially true on the discount priced coolers. This is where you're more likely going to find bad thermal compound. I don't know where they're sourcing their material from, the thermal material, but it's, you know, we saw this with Alzai, we see this with Thermalright, and the one thing they have in common is they're lesser known brands and typically cheaper than competitors. Not always, but typically cheaper, less expensive. So no big deal. Not a massive thing to clean up. I got plenty more nitrile gloves. They're very inexpensive. So a little bit of waste, but not terrible. Better than wasting my time, because that's not replaceable. Okay. So I'll grab some of my side thermal compound here. Do not mix and match different thermal compounds. I have many tubes of this side thermal compound, so if I don't have enough, see, that's the end of that tube, I'll grab another tube of the exact same. You can mix the exact same, and I mean exactly the same. Not just the same manufacturer, but the same brand of thermal compound, regardless, or model, because some brands may have different levels of thermal compound if that's what they do. They may have a higher end and a lower end, and all the higher end is for the enthusiast people, the extremists, who do like massive overclocking and they need every degree. For the rest of us, though, you won't see any difference other than in your wallet. But if it makes you feel good to buy the more expensive stuff, don't let me get in your way. I don't build with the expensive stuff because it would just be disrespectful to my customers' value of their money. Here, let me spend your money for you on things you don't need and will never know the difference on. But if it makes you feel better, or you justify it some way, you go ahead and buy it. Let me get this tube thrown away and this glove off. There we go. And finally, we can get some progress here on this build. So now we're just going to attach the heatsink onto those brackets, which looks pretty straightforward. I'm going to go on this direction and line those thumb screws up over the screws that are standing up off the brackets. I'll grab that same driver. Oh, I got thermal compound on me. Great. Oh, that's a much bigger hole. Cool. All right. I can't see. What am I doing? There we go. And we'll just go back and forth. Why do I feel like I've got thermal compound all over me? How did that even happen? Don't over tighten these. You want them tight. But if you over tighten, you'll snap the heads of the screws right off. And then finding replacement screws, you're going to have to deal directly with the manufacturer, wait for the mail, or order another cooler and get it much faster from Amazon, all because you over tightened unnecessarily. So make it tight. Don't take it any further than just normal tight. Normal tight means the screws stop moving, and if you try and turn it even another eighth of a turn, it fights you on it. Stop there. All right, let me just get this thermal compound off of me before I... This thing about thermal compound is that it gets all over everything. So it starts on your finger, and then everything you touch transfers a little bit. But somehow it still stays on your finger, no matter how much it puts on everything else you're touching. It's a strange phenomenon. All right, so the cooler, the heatsink rather, is on, and then let's grab the fan. And I want the fan with the bracket side fan brackets facing down. We blow the air down. And I want the cable coming out by the CPU fan header, which is over here. So we could put it on this way or this way. But since it's already sort of bent in that direction, we'll keep that moving in the same direction. Now, these fan buckles, I just don't understand why do we have two different fan buckles. What happens if we try this one? Just don't understand. It goes on super easy, almost too easy. Yeah, I mean, I don't get it. What are these for? Is it? I gotta know. I mean, this doesn't make any sense to me. How is it possible with every cooler I've ever installed, I've never had to have two different sets of brackets to choose between? These standoffs, these are used for other Intel, I think, socket 2011. So we aren't using those. We're probably 20 minutes away from having this thing turned on, just in case you're wondering. This is the longest part of this build right now. And had I selected this cooler to begin with, had I known, we'd already be done with the build. Wouldn't have to take the other one off. But you shouldn't be in a hurry when you're working on your computer. You should enjoy your build. That doesn't seem right at all to me. Whether or not, you see that bracket goes all the way down there. See right down there underneath the heatsink? And the default brackets, the ones that didn't have tape on them, they go right down the middle, which is where the groove is. So my only guess is that if you wanted to put a thicker fan, that's what I'm guessing these are for. If you didn't want to use the enclosed fan, and you went with a fan that was taller, such as the fan we just removed. Yeah, let me go grab that and see. That's what I think it's for. But they only give you one fan. It's not like you get to choose between two fans. So here's the thickness of the fan from the cooler we just removed. Right? And let's say you wanted to use a fan of that thickness. Then the standard brackets aren't going to reach. They won't reach. So they give you these brackets that you put it on a taller fan, and then it locks in. The problem is with this taller fan, this whole motherboard isn't going to fit in that case, which is why we switched the cooler to begin with. So this just seems to add confusion. Maybe the brackets need to come with the fans and not with the cooler, with the heatsink, because of the application. I don't know. What do you think? That's bizarre. We're going to give you fan brackets that don't fit that will fit a fan that we don't give you. And we're going to give you the fan brackets that fit the fan that we do give you, and then we're not going to talk about it in the manual. Okay. But at least I know. I've got an answer. Okay. And just for now, we'll plug this in. Good enough. For now. It's not good enough to be complete, but it's good enough for us to continue building and to keep making progress forward. And then we'll come back and we'll refine that with some nylon zip ties, presuming everything works. So I know I just got done saying good enough wouldn't be good enough, but as we're building and we're making progress versus if we're delivering it to a customer. So when building, you do whatever you can to reduce having to take things apart and replace parts because of a cooler size in this example. And so you say, okay, well, that's good enough for testing, but we don't intend to deliver it to a client that way or call it done until it's right. So just to clarify my statement so you don't think I'm a hypocrite. It's all in context. There's my I/O shield that I was looking for right there. Now this motherboard is not chock with a lot of ports. We've got 4 USBs, 2.5 gig LAN, DisplayPort, HDMI, audio, and then Wi-Fi antenna, but there's no Wi-Fi on the motherboard. So they give you the wires to go back here. You'd have to punch these little parts out. But you could also add Wi-Fi through USB, and you could add Wi-Fi through an internal card if you weren't putting a graphics card in there. Or you can put a little M.2 Wi-Fi in there and use the included antenna wires to go from the bracket to the Wi-Fi card, which is very similar to a laptop or a mini PC. I'm going to leave that off for now. It's not important. All right, let's get back to our case. Let's pop this I/O shield in there. Wow, does it fit that loosely? It's almost like they cut the hole out just a little bit big. Usually, you can struggle to fit the I/O shield in there. Let me go widescreen since I'm getting a little blocked off here by the camera. With the I/O shield here, it just fit in there very loosely. Sometimes this is a part people struggle with because, you know, when you get one side in, you go to push the other side, and then the first side pops out. This one, it just barely sits in there at all. So I do feel like they could have made this, they could have made this cutout area maybe 1/2 millimeter, 1/4 millimeter. It's just that much too loose. But the motherboard's going to hold it in place regardless. And I'll try and do this at an angle that you can see. We're going to turn this around so the I/O ports face you guys with the I/O shield facing you guys. The back has to go in behind all of the umbilicals first. Oh, there's also a small hole here that's for a CMOS reset. Okay, now I can secure this in place, so grab some screws. This is a different bag of screws from what came with the cooler. That's why we kept all these together. We're done with the cooler stuff, so we'll just get that out of the way. Just avoid confusion, this too. Got some nylon zip ties they've included. Oh, there's little rubber feet to go onto the bottom of the case where the metal has little grooves, and this will sit right in there so you don't scratch up your desk. That's a nice touch. We've got an extra motherboard standoff, just one, in case your board has an additional mounting point. And then we've got a couple different types of screws here, some for mounting 3.5 inch, some for mounting 2.5 inch drives. And then one of these sets will be used for securing the board down. Now the case doesn't come with any documentation, so you're going to have to use your critical thinking skills here. I know I had, 7 screws? So I know if I don't have 7 of a particular screw type here, it's not the right one. So just simply counting them. Traditionally, these really short flathead screws are used for SSDs. I doubt that's used on our motherboard, but I could be wrong. And there are 2 different types of those flathead screws. And I'm imagining that one is for SSDs and one's for HDDs, or 2.5 inch versus 3.5. I doubt that those are for holding the motherboard in. Now, if it were me, I'd use the little handhead Phillips screw. Do we have 7? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's looking promising. 6, 7. And remember, we have an extra standoff, so there should be an 8th one. Well, that's got to be them just doing the math. Everything else there's not enough of. Let me just try turning one by hand. I don't want to use my power driver and then find out I got the wrong thread type and strip out the standoff or get the screw stuck. Boy, that's not even getting started. Make sure I got it lined up correctly. Oh, like a glove. We're good to go for the electric driver. Set it on 3 for my torque, just so I don't over torque them. And we just want to start them so we can kind of wiggle the board around. And I was just thinking, what if the cooler is in the way of the mounting holes? But I think we're okay. One is here, and the other one is way up here towards the top. That's why I have a long bit on the end of this driver. Precisely this reason. I have a 6-inch Phillips number 2. We go here, and then we go this corner. Boy, you're right in the corner. And one more, right? Isn't there one more? Yeah, right up here. With all the screws started, now I can tighten them down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Da 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 da. Rocket science. Don't think we need anything else in here. So instead of risking knocking these down onto the floor and then wondering how many I had and if I pick them all up, I'll put them back in the bag. The nylon zip ties and the rubber feet I will leave out for later. Our power supply is this modular cables, power cable. Comes with 4 screws, which we're going to use right now, and we'll get that power supply installed. Those are the 4 screws for the power supply. We've got some documentation. An empty box. Okay. The question is, should I put the power supply in now? Or will that interfere with any of our USB cable attachments? I don't think it's going to interfere at all. So let's just drop it in there. Be done with it. Can't see where the... Quickly running out of room on my desk. Bear with me here for a second. Oh, that's interesting. One screw, 2, 3, but there's no room for a 4th one. Just validate these are tight enough. 1, 2, 3. So here's the deal. On this case, if you look very closely, there is a spot for 2 screws to go right next to each other. You got to pick one or the other. Don't use them both. It's ridiculous and overkill. Right up here, Where is it in this photo? There is a spot for another screw. Go right there. Now look, if you're one of those people, for all I know you might be, who just has to use all the screws, and you think it's somehow beneficial to add another screw right there, I don't know what you're thinking, because I think that's kind of dumb. If we put one here, then we don't need this one. But if you insist and you want to leave them both in, I guess you can. I think the idea behind this is that you can loosen it and move the power supply up in certain cases where you would have, well, I mean, in this case, this is the case design. I'm not sure, since these also do not have cutouts, that you just loosen the screws and pop the power supply out, but that's what that one's for. If we take this one out because it just looks stupid with two in there, then it looks like you're missing a screw, kind of. So I know some of you just aren't going to be happy unless I fill in every hole. So I don't know. That's bizarre. Maybe it's a place to keep your extra screw if you lose one. I guess it's not really securing anything any better. That's just weird. So let me set this back down. We're just about ready to fire this bad boy up, because this is where we get to just your basic boilerplate. Plug in your cables. We have a USB 3 cable. This is a good time to make sure all your cables aren't interwoven with each other. And I guess we'll run the front panel header down below this set of cables so we don't have them all twisted. So our USB 3 cable is going to go on right there. Clicks in, and then we'll have to just fold those cables down later to get the panel on. Our front port umbilicals, that's our switches and LEDs. That's all the same pattern as we've used on every build, with the power LED positive cable going on the top row of pins. And then the power switch going on the next two pins over. The hard drive LED goes below the power LED, positive below the positive, negative below the negative on the pin set down below. Now next to that traditionally would go your reset switch just below your power switch. But because we don't have a reset button on this case, we don't deal with that. This is our front port audio cable. And it looks like we want to run that underneath this one, because that is a long run. And this cable is cut out to basically reach the that area, but it's not giving you much slack for cable management. So that audio cable, you know, there's just not a lot of extra there. But again, cable management's really not an issue. And of course, we can route, if we wanted to add a little tension, we could route this cable behind the front board umbilical just to kind of keep it a cleaner look. If we were to take it this way and route it around this cable, it forces it sort of down and out of the way. These are decisions you make depending on which parts you're using in which case and what your personal preferences are. But by routing it around that cable, for example, we are putting more pressure on this cable, and it does want to force this up. It's a personal decision that you make when you're building. Not sure I like it that way. I think I'm going to put it back the way it was. And at least the front board umbilical cable for the power switch and power LED can at least keep this cable from rising up too high. Finally, this is our front port USB 2, and this motherboard just so happens to provide us a USB 2 header right next to our audio plug. So I guess whichever way we decide to run the audio plug, we should run the USB 2 plug. And then all we have left are power. So we've got the 24-pin power and the 8-pin CPU power connector. Boy, I hope that's going to be long enough. Wait a minute. Is that for a graphics card maybe? Let's see. What is this? Oh, goody. Molex and SATA connectors. If you were going to put 2.5-inch or 3.5-inch drive in here, this power supply does give you the cable for it. And then this, oh, this is GPU power, this one. So this red one, okay, so this red one is going to go on the red connector here on the power supply. Pretty interesting design there. Red to red. I mean, you can't get that wrong, can you? But if I put that in right now, it's going to be hard for me to reach behind it to these connectors. So I might as well put the big connector on now. Now, how they're going from this little connector, where did I get all the wires from this one to that one? That's a little sketchy. All right, well, I guess if it works. So that one's got to go on all the way in the back, which I can barely see. So let me turn this so I can seize it. So we'll plug that one on. Right. There. You know, I could have put these cables on before installing the power supply, but that wouldn't be nearly as entertaining. Okay, now I'll put the red one on. I can't see. Man, I hope your view's better than mine. Okay, there we go. All right, so then this is our CPU power. Where's the connector? Our CPU power goes right up there. You can see right at the top of the screen. Right there. So let me plug that in. These are sharp edges, by the way, so it's a good way to cut your hands up. There it goes, just heard that click. Then our big motherboard power connector. That's going to be a little tricky because that is located right by all the I/O stuff here, right down here. So let me figure this one out. Usually the clip goes towards the outside of the board, so I just need to move some cables out of our way and also consider my cable routing as well, because I would prefer this runs underneath those cables. Otherwise I'll be having to take this back off and do it again. So if you think doing it once is difficult, you should try taking it off and doing it again. It's twice as much work. Oh, that's not too terrible. I've worked on many mATX systems that were much harder to access. The problem is getting some pressure down on this. Let me grab a flashlight so I can see what I'm doing. It's an awfully dark area. In retrospect, given that these cables are modular, I probably should have went ahead and put these on the motherboard before securing the board down. It's only a few screws if I need to take the board back out, though. Just don't want to break anything. For some reason, it's just not sitting down all the way. I just want to double check if there's anything blocking my path, that the clip is on the outside of the board, which it is. So it may just be I just can't get good pressure on there. And if it's not on tight, you're going to have all kinds of weird system problems, from not booting to blue screening and all kinds of weird behaviors because without a tight fit, every one of those 24-pin cables may not be making a solid connection. Yeah, it's definitely having a hard time fitting. There's a couple different ways we can approach this. One is we can temporarily remove this back panel right here, so we get, you know, more access to this without the cables in the way. And it looks like there's 1, 2, 3, 4 screws there. Or I can take the board back out, or I can continue to struggle with it. It's just these USB cables. These are the USB 3 cables right here. They are right over where we need to be. And they are very stiff cables. And I think this power supply cable is also, the plug is just, boy, the tolerance in that plug is just 0. There's no tolerance. It's got to be exact or it's not sitting. Could have broken them in a little bit first at the very least. You know, plug it in and unplug it while the board is out and the cable's not connected to the power supply, and just seat it and unseat it and reseat it and make sure it sits solidly, so that if you do have problems like this, you know, well, you can avoid having problems like this is what I'm saying. And if you do have these problems, it's outside of the case. Like, I am pushing way too hard on this. We're not getting anywhere. So there's something out of tolerance. I don't understand. Maybe the clip is in our own way. Maybe the clip isn't flexing back like it's supposed to. If the notch on the plug is too wide, the plastic clip on the connector may not be able to flex itself back, and maybe that's a resistance we're hitting. Wow, that just isn't. Wasn't expecting that. We should have had this thing turned on 10 minutes ago. It's always the last one, right? That is the final plug, and that's the one that's going to give us grief. Murphy's Law, every single time. I mean, at this point, I should know better. Wow, that is just not good. And, you know, who's to blame? Is it the motherboard maker or is it the power supply maker? Maybe the plug's just longer than most. Maybe the point from here to here is somehow longer on this power supply. I don't know, but that is definitely not all the way in. And that kind of freaks me out. I don't understand why. That should have just snapped in. I think it's as far as it's going to go sitting down, and I'm anxious to try it. So we're going to do it and see if smoke comes out about that. So I'm going to go back over to camera 1, and we're going to grab our power cable. Now, these little tiny power supplies, they don't have switches to flip them on and off. So as soon as we put power into it, it's going to give power to our board. And if that main power cable is not connected straight or all the way down, it could arc, could have all kinds of problems. So because we're live and it'll make an interesting show, let's just give it a shot. And as I mentioned, this other piece that's sitting on the table, if this went back over, you'll see it's going to block some of our airflow. And it's just another reason why I would say keep your drives, where was it? Is it down here? I don't remember. But essentially, when you put the drives in, which I think maybe it went this way. So it's not going to block our airflow, but it absolutely blocks access to any of the PCIe ports, or in this case, we have one for a graphics card. So you can either put a graphics card in, or you can put one 3.5-inch drive here in the middle, or two 2.5-inch drives side by side. I just say, look, just put them external USB, be done with it, keep the heat out of the case, keep it open. when we put the panel on top of this, you know, you're not going to see anything. It's just going to be a silver box, which I like. Let's grab a keyboard and a mouse. Turn that on, turn that on. We'll plug into, let's use a USB 2 port up front. That way we can test the USB 2 port. And I need an HDMI cable and an Ethernet cable. So there's my HDMI right here. And our Ethernet cable, which is right here. Because we've previously prepped the motherboard in part 1 of this video, we already have Windows on it and everything should be ready to boot. Here we go. Power. Power? No power. All the way in here. Did I knock my power cable off? I knocked my front umbilicals completely off. Let me disconnect power. So as I was struggling with that main motherboard cable, all the more reason to not, to pay attention to how you're routing your cabling so one cable doesn't end up pulling another cable off, which is exactly what just happened. Hard drive LED. And the power LED. Yeah, I definitely have to get a flashlight for this. I guess I have to put the power LED on first, or I cannot see where it goes once the hard drive LED is plugged in. It's usually the other way around on most motherboards, but this one is a little different. Okay, now the power switch, and now the hard drive LED can go on last. Okay, then we'll push down on all of those, make sure they're well seated. Sometimes when you plug them in one at a time, as you plug in the one next to it, it starts to lift up on the opposite one. That's normal, to be expected. Okay, let's try one more time. Let's see if we get any life out of this bad boy here. Power. Our LED lights up. Fan is spinning. Then let's jump over to our input, which is this one right here. Hopefully, oh yeah, there we go. We got our signal. And let me put myself in a corner. Camera 1, corner. Okay, so now my question is, what do our temps look like? Full screen over here so I can see it the way you do. Oh, it wants me to activate Windows. Well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go to SCD keys. I'm going to buy a discounted Windows, legitimate legal Windows 10 Pro license key for 15 or 16 bucks. And then I'm going to go to activate Windows, enter that product key in that I purchased for Windows 10 Pro. And that will activate this, a Windows 11 Pro. If this were Windows 11 Home, I would buy a Windows 10 Home key because they're just a few bucks cheaper. And they work the same right now because it's a free upgrade from Microsoft, at least until the end of October or middle of October. It's hard to say when Microsoft will cancel that free upgrade, but once it's done, it's good for the life of the motherboard. All right, let's see. Temperatures, HWI info. How does this cooler work? Is it adequate? Let's see. Oh, those temps are sitting really good. They're sitting better than the other one did. Okay, well, let's see what happens if we torture the hell out of it. Not that you should. We'll find out in the first 2 minutes of Cinebench what's happening here with our cooler's ability to keep that chip cool. Counts down from 10 minutes over here. And we want to watch, well, this is our current temps. And you'll see it's rising rapidly. These are our maximum achieved temperatures here. How is it possible that this is running cooler when there's not as much heatsink surface area as the one we just removed from up here. This is running really, really nicely. Much better than I expected. So again, we'll let this go full 2 minutes. It still could get much hotter. It's quiet. Really quiet. Fan's turning. I hear it turning. It's just barely noticeable. Our temps are very reasonable. And just as a reminder, our specs on the system, the way that we built it, you're looking at a Ryzen 9 7940HX. We're using the built-in Radeon graphics, but we can add a GPU to this. We've got 32 gigs of RAM in there with Windows 11 Pro 24H2 fully updated. We just have to activate that or not. I mean, it's not like Windows is going to stop working. I mean, we're at a minute and a half and we're still maximum 83. It's really, really good. If I run CPU-Z, let me minimize this for a second. Did I leave CPU-Z? We can pull up the details of that RAM. We can do both things at the same time. We can multitask, man. Let's really get that CPU hot. Memory, it's DDR5. 2 sticks of 16 for a total of 32 in dual channel mode. Very good. Let's go back to our Cinebench. How are we doing over here? Maximum looks like still under 85, which is really, really impressive. Okay, so this is going to be the worst of it. It's not going to get any hotter than this, at least not on this multi-core test. So let's stop that and run the single core test. See if that changes anything with regards to setting new records. That is not what I was preparing for the worst. It actually runs really, really good. Wow, I'm happy to be wrong. This Thermalright cooler is far better than the Up Here cooler. I think they're about the same price, and the Thermalright cooler is half the size. Well, 2/3 of the size anyway. All right, we did hit, looks, yeah, we're just right there at 86, looks like our maximum. I am very happy with that. We'll let that run a full 2 minutes, so we get down to about the 8-minute. But this is not really what this is designed to do. If you really wanted to game with it and push some high AAA title games on this, you could, but you're going to need a bigger case for a GPU. Right, because a regular 40 series or 30 series graphics card will not fit in here. It'll fit on the board and the board will handle it. It's the case and the power supply that you're going to be limited by. So you could buy a bigger case. Montech has a brand new case out. We've ordered it and we're going to show it to you here when it arrives next week. We'll do a build in it, I think. Maybe I can show it to you. If we bring up the browser. Go to Amazon. I'll show you what this new case looks like. It's pretty funky. And it's a micro ATX, but it's much, much bigger. It's small, but it's much bigger than this one. Because like I said, you couldn't get a case any smaller. Is it Montech or Montech? This one. This is a brand new model, just came out. It's got leather on it and a carrying handle. I don't know. I just thought, why not? It's got the full 2 USB down here at the bottom with the USB-C, so they're not stealing anything as far as USB, the way other case manufacturers do. They have 2 different models. They have a Pro version, right? This is Heritage Pro. The Heritage Pro is a little different in that it contains 4 fans. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then it's got this piece on the side to hang your headphones on, which looks like that. I don't want that. You know, it's $109. I ordered just the regular without the 4 fans and the headphone extension thingy. This is the one I have coming. And this motherboard will fit perfectly in there with giving us more depth for a full-size GPU. If that's what you want to do, just buy the right case. This isn't that much more, right? This one was what, $50, and this one's, I guess, nearly twice that. But you're also getting 3 times the case for less than twice as much money. So make sure you make the right decision for your needs. Don't get mad because you made bad choices. That's on you. It's not on the manufacturers. So anyway, our temps here, highest we've seen is 86. That is far better than I was expecting. And then as this test stops, you'll see the CPU temps are just dropping into the 30s, which is fantastic, pun intended. So finally, there's a couple of final things I can consider on this build. I forgot my other camera was up there. I hope you were able to see everything on the Amazon page. Sorry, I was full screen on my side, so I didn't notice that till just now. Let's go back, and let's say we leave this out. Right, that would be my plan. Leave that out. And if I lay this flat, just to see what it looks like complete. And you really should shut the system down when you do stuff like this. I could add a little Wi-Fi M.2 card and hook the antennas up. Maybe I'll do that off camera. I do have some Wi-Fi cards laying around here I could use. And we could do a little bit of cable management in just trying to get these a little more under control, so we're not fighting them to get the lid on. Yeah, there's just one little catch on there. The bottom has to go in first. Yeah, and so if I zip tie those, that will make any sort of maintenance for opening this up and blowing dust out of it just a lot cleaner. But I don't want to cover the fans for 2 reasons, obvious. We don't want to cover the fans to prevent the fan from stopping to spin or having anything interfere with it. And 2, it would make the case too thick for the panel to fit back on. We're that close to the limit on space. So I may not even be able to get this on without a little bit of zip ties on those cables. They are fighting me. So the power supply cable needs to go down and out of the way. That one's in my way. And then the USB 3 cable, which is another stiff cable, it can be rerouted in a way that it's essentially, instead of folding up, we'd fold it backwards so it goes towards the motherboard instead of towards the panel. And then we hold that position with a zip tie. But I'm just trying to figure out if I can just fold it right now and use its own weight against it here. I think that'll work. So maybe I misjudged this. You don't have to put the bottom on first after all. There's just 2 clips. Once you line those 2 clips up, hey, when you follow the way it should be done, it's actually much simpler than the way I was doing it. Pretty clean, pretty quiet. And then these little indentations, this is where the rubber feet go. So you could peel these off. Like so. Except I can't see. You obviously don't want to block any of these holes. So if you're considering purchasing this computer, you can leave it upright the way I have it, but there's no feet on the other side. In fact, I may be blocking some vent holes on the other side. It is intended to lay on the desk where the feet are. What a concept. You don't have to do that. You can keep it vertical. You could see it runs just fine that way. But without anything to prevent it from scratching up my desk, I suppose you could put a mouse mat or something soft or a tablecloth underneath of it. Or you could just use it the way the manufacturer intended, God forbid, and put it on its feet, and then you don't have to worry about that other stuff. And there's no screws underneath these feet that have to be removed. So if we set this down now, this is really how it's intended to be displayed. However, I just noticed there is a place for feet under here after all. So you can set the computer this way, But remember, there are vents over here. Or if I change my mind, and I better do it now, I can take these little rubber feet off because they only give us one set, and just move them up here. And that will also give you a little bit of space for the air vents. I thought I looked at this earlier and there wasn't anything here, but maybe I was looking at the other side of it. I kind of wish they gave me 2 sets of feet. Maybe it would look ugly, you know, to have one set of feet exposed at all times, but at least that way you could rotate it and not have to worry about, you know, is that the side the rubber feet on? You got 2 ways to get it right. But thankfully the adhesive on here isn't super glue, so that can come off and the feet would go there, and then we can set this up like so. There we go. I think I like that better. Or I might change my mind again. Now, I want to reemphasize that everything you see here, except for the Minisforum motherboard, was purchased thanks to our viewers supporting this channel. This enables us to buy the parts we want to buy, not the parts who can simply afford the marketing money. There's a lot of big companies out there that send products out to content creators and pay them to make the content, and the creators doing it to pay the bills. If we can pay our bills, then we can buy the products we want to buy, review the products we want to review, do it on our own timeline without worrying if a manufacturer likes it or not. Because if they don't like it, maybe they won't pay us again. You know what I mean? So this keeps us free and independent to be unbiased and to genuinely showcase parts I'm really interested in. The fact that we can work with Minisforum and they send us parts I'm genuinely interested in is helpful, but it's not the whole picture. I still needed a case, I still needed a power supply, I still needed RAM, I still needed storage, I still need a Windows license key in order to finish the build. And if that was all provided to me, I'd have no control over the design or any uniqueness. I could be building the same thing other content creators are building. But if I'm just shopping around and picking what I want, the odds of anybody else doing the same parts on a build video, highly unlikely. And that means I get to provide to you unique content. Because when manufacturers pay techs to review their products, it's really a commercial. If there's money changing hands, that's a commercial, it's not a review. And the person doing the building, typically, you'll notice if they never have anything negative to say, there's certain channels I won't mention that they do reviews, they're commercials. And that's how they pay their bills. It's okay, it's just a little misleading that it's a review. There should always be some criticism. And if I thought for a minute I was going to dislike something, I wouldn't have ordered it. So I didn't know with this case manufacturer, this case design, I've never seen anything like it. These flex power supplies, never even heard of that as a standard before. If I haven't heard of it, maybe you haven't heard of it either. And maybe you're not interested in mini ATX like I am, mini ITX. But micro ATX may be a little too big for you. This is that middle ground. And that Minisforum motherboard is so unique. There isn't another one like it currently. And as a Ryzen 9, it's pretty high end. You know, what it's capable of doing, this is not a budget rig here. This is easily a 10-year build if you take care of it, meaning dust it out. And, you know, there's not a lot of reason for you to be opening this up. And that's where a lot of accidental damage occurs from end users. They start toying around with something. You just have one slot in here. So you're going to be adding a low profile card like a 4060 will fit in here. Or you'll be adding some other low profile card. How often do you need to open that up and take it out? The only reason you should be opening this up, aside from that one upgrade, maybe if you're going to upgrade your RAM or your SSD, there's really no reason to get in there otherwise. So keeping people out of it is one sure way that the system will last longer, even if it's a quote-unquote simple upgrade. People make mistakes and things happen you never expected, and you took a perfectly good working computer and broke it by trying to make it better. I'm not saying you personally have done it. I'm saying that keeps me very busy with work. When my clients pay me as a managed service provider, the deal is nobody touches the inside of those computers but me. And that's why you'll see me bring these computers out that are 10, 12 years old, and apart from being super dusty, they're perfectly fine. Keep their hands out of them.
Now, they are designed for you to do upgrades, but they're not designed for you to open them and keep swapping out parts more than once or twice a year, because you'll start bending the plastic and it'll break the things that hold the RAM, the sockets, the clips. All that stuff is not meant to be open and closed, open and closed, open and closed. It's not high traffic items. So yes, you can do that and you can upgrade it, but where is the point where it breaks? It's like a piece of metal. You can bend a piece of metal back and forth and back and forth, but if you keep doing that and it's not on a proper hinge, like a door would be, that piece of metal is going to snap in half. The other day when we were having a camera problem, it turned out that it was my HDMI cable. This is a brand new one. These cost $15, and it seems about every 18 months I break them. Why are they breaking? Because they're not intended to be plugged and unplugged as often as I do it. They're a thin cable. They're designed to be flexible, lightweight. You can run them under carpeting once, twice, maybe half dozen times in its whole life. It's not intended for me to plug and unplug. They make much thicker, less flexible cables that can withstand that kind of abuse, but they look like crap and they're difficult, they're uncomfortable for me. So if I have to spend $15 every 18 months to replace one of these, it's because of me. It's because I'm not using the right cable, but I prefer this type of cable. And if I have to buy a new one for $15, and that's the cost of doing business here on YouTube, okay? It's not a big deal. But I guarantee you, if you take a product that's not designed for you to keep messing about with it in ways of screws stripping out, materials bending and breaking, the more often you do that, the more likely, even though you did nothing wrong, the part just gives out. So when you have very few parts to upgrade to begin with, you have less reason to open this. So even if you're tempted, you've got no good reason other than just those changing a video card or RAM, pretty much, or an SSD. That's it. How often are you doing it? If for that reason, I think you'll easily get 10 years out of a build like this. Easy. And what people's downfall is, the home users in particularly, is they won't leave things alone. Oh, I got to change my thermal paste. Why? Because I saw a video on it. Maybe I can get my temperatures down. Oh yeah, 3 degrees. Totally worth it. But you accept your responsibilities. You do what you want. I ain't your dad. But I'm just telling you the secrets of the business. And at least as far as like nobody's really talking about it. The rule is, if the computer needs to be worked on, I'm the one working on it for my business clients. Otherwise, they're going to make my life a living hell. They're going to call me with all kinds of self-created problems. That's going to come out of my retainer, and that means I'm going to start losing money instead of making money because I don't bill hourly. So in order for me to make a profit on a retainer, it has to be left the way I left it. And anytime there's something wrong, I'm the one who has to address it. If the customer won't follow those rules, there's no more retainer. Now we go back to hourly. And I don't want that stress, quite frankly. I like it to be steady, rock solid, reliable, predictable. And then if you have a power outage or something where a part just randomly fails, I'm okay with that because it's so infrequent, I'm going to be profitable. But people monkeying around inside that I have to fix for free, you can see why I'm so opposed. Like, leave it alone. Sometimes you got to open them and upgrade them. That's great. It shouldn't be more than twice a year. After that, it's excessive. And you should expect, if you do that, you're going to run into some issues of strip screws, broken parts, just from the flexing back and forth. Don't take my word for it. If it hasn't happened to you already, and you continue that behavior, it's going to happen. Very likely. Ian Gooch with a 10-pound super chat says, hey, Carey, good content as usual. Here's a few pounds for your coffers from London, where it is 44 degrees Fahrenheit. Well, right on. Thank you, Ian. Cheers, mate. Is that how I say it? Cheers, mate. Sounds terrible when I say it. I'll just be American and say thank you. Appreciate you, Ian. Go have some fish and chips for me. Okay, we're at the end of the show here. If you guys have any questions for me, if you've asked earlier and I haven't seen them, I'm not ignoring you. I was focused on this. Now I'm focused on you. So for the next 10 or 15 minutes, if there are questions, I will stick around as long as it takes to address them. Otherwise, we'll wrap it up for tonight. Again, I've got the Montech case coming. That'll be a build next week. I don't know what I'm putting in it yet. I thought I might have to move this build into that case if this was running hot. This is running cooler than it was with the bigger cooler on it. So I'm going to avoid up here coolers from now on. If I didn't learn that lesson once, I've learned it twice now. And I'm definitely going to look some more at these Thermalright coolers because that's impressive. I don't know how they're doing it. And the only complaint I've got is that confusion with the fan brackets, which was weird. But maybe that's a normal thing for that manufacturer, and it's my first time. And the other thing was the thermal compound was old and cruddy, you know, dried up. That's a minor complaint. It's a major complaint if the cooler costs 3 times more. Like if I bought a Noctua cooler at 3 times the cost and it contained thermal compound that was all dried up, unacceptable. But for a $30 cooler, I'll eat the cost of the $2 for the thermal compound. Black Tornado wants to know if anyone knows what power supply a Goodisri MX91. I don't even know what a Goodisri 91. What is it? Goodisri MX91. Is that a computer? What is that? John Paul Bacon said, "Hey, that's a nice build." It's definitely different, isn't it? I like it. No RGB, no case window, and it's fast. Twist my arm all day. Paul House said that's the same motherboard that's located in my Minisforum 795S7 Mini ITX. Is it? Maybe it is. We do have a Minisforum 795. What's it called? I can never remember these numbers. 795S7. 795S7. Let's grab it and set them side by side, because I don't know what case Minisforum uses, but I think it's bigger than this. And Minisforum's case wants to sit flat, not up on its side. I don't know which motherboard specifically Minisforum is using. It may be the same one. You may be right, except you're throwing me off when you say Mini ITX, because this is not a Mini ITX. This is a micro ATX. So if Minisforum did use a Mini ITX, it's not the same board. But here is the Minisforum. And by the way, one of my favorite cases. Oh my. Okay. They're a lot closer than I thought. This case is a little longer. Here's the Minisforum. And of course, this is already built. You don't have to put it together, which may be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on your perspective. Rig's just slightly taller on this one, just barely. Let me move this up a little bit. USB ports. We only have one USB Type A. Here we've got 4 USB Type A's. 2 USB 2s, 2 USB 3s. But there is no USB-C on this case, but this motherboard has no USB-C. So if this board has USB-C on it from Minisforum, this must be a different motherboard than the one we put in. I don't think it's the same board because we don't have a USB-C connector on this board. But they're very close. And in fact, the power supply here is a standard, is a different standard than this power supply. Just look at the thickness of the power supplies. If we turn this around, look at the height difference. See how thick, right, this side. See how thick this power supply is? And then see how thin that power supply is? They're not the same. But boy, are they similar on the outside though. As far as dimensions, the Minisforum is a little bit smaller. So I think this is Mini ITX and not a micro ATX. And that's the thing that makes this such a big deal. But by the way, I think this was a pretty big deal when it came out. And I still think that if you're looking for a system, even bare bones, you can buy this where you put your own RAM and storage, or you can buy it with RAM and storage. throw an RTX 4060 in it, which is what this has, that will equally work in this machine over here. And you've got a nice gaming rig. I mean, we're talking AAA title games here, no joke. So, you know, for around $1,000, that's a lot for $1,000. You know, gaming rigs are often, geez, a customer reached out to me, just spent $2,800 at Costco for a gaming PC. Yeah, full size, but nonetheless, you could buy almost 3 of these for that price. Something to think about. And again, super thanks to our friends at Minisforum for making this build possible, and for also sending us the S7, the 795S7, is that what it's called? I'm very impressed with this. And I'm also very impressed with this. So I do like working with the folks at Minisforum, and you know, they make products that make me excited. They're different than everybody else, and not different just for the sake of being different, but in a way that makes sense, saves you money, and has great build quality. What else you want? I'm just looking back at the chat room here. Black Tornado says the Goodsuri MX01 is a small form factor case. Maybe I can Google that. I've never heard of it. Sorry. Goodsuri MX01. It looks like Amazon sells it. Goodisori. There's an I in there. Oh. Okay. This is somebody going, if I could find one of these for $6 at a swap meet. So basically, it looks like you found the cheapest possible. That's all right. Usually when I see stuff like that, it's a big red flag, like, oh boy, $30 case. I wouldn't expect too much, but let's see if we can get the window capture here, share that with the audience. Is this what you have? 30 bucks. MX01, SECC fanless, mini ITX home theater PC chassis. Oh boy, fanless. What's the front look like? Audio, USB Type A, doesn't say if it's 2 or USB 3. Let's assume it's USB 3. Power button, no reset, no hard drive LED, just a power LED around the button. What power supply is the question? Let's take a look back there. There's no power supply cut out. Well, your question makes a lot more sense to me now. You have this giant cutout, which is way bigger than we typically see on a standard computer case. Has anybody reviewed this? And what are they using it for? This person's got something, great case. What do they got in here? Well, that's a standard mini ITX board, so how are they powering it? That's a great question. I don't see a power supply in here at all. Wouldn't you think they'd mention that in their review? Perfect for my HT. So it's for a home theater build. Maybe they've got a power supply. This right here, this cable, that's their power. Interesting. I needed a hole. I needed a through hole for a DC barrel jack for a Pico power supply unit, and 2 through holes for the external wireless. So did he drill these holes? Is that what he's saying? They don't give you any holes for power. What? Well, today just got more interesting. What the heck? I'm using this with an Asus J4005 motherboard and built-in CPU using M.2, plenty of room, vertical stand. I do wish I had USB 3.0. Oh, okay, there's a mounting hole for the 12-volt DC input jack and 2 mounting. Oh, the holes are already there in the case. Okay, so maybe they just have to be punched out. Scroll up. Let's take another look at the back. Oops, that was it there. Okay, so 2 Wi-Fi holes, a couple of serial I/O. I don't see a hole for a DC jack. So what this is you're sort of in between like a Raspberry Pi and an Intel-based or AMD-based mini-ATX. There are some motherboards. Switch back over here. I'm only seeing one motherboard, and it really upset me, and I think I still have it over here. One of the very first motherboards Minisforum came out with, mini-ATX board, you had to use a laptop-style power brick to power it. And when they sent me the board, they don't send me the power brick. They go, here you go, test it. And that's this board right here. Now, with this board, if I bring it up close to the camera, this is a company called IRTech, which is related to Minisforum. And we did a whole build video. Well, we didn't do a build video. We did a motherboard prep on this. And you see it's going to get powered right here with a barrel connector. And it's a standard 19 volt. But they don't include it and they don't sell it. So you're supposed to just source that on your own, which kind of upset me. Because everything else looked like a pretty standard, you know, pardon the dust, it's been sitting. But IRTech is the name. And you'll see we put our RAM in there, and we put SSDs under there, NVMe SSDs under there. And this would work in that case. This would do it. And then you just use one of those Wi-Fi antenna holes. This has an I/O shield. So I take it back. You wouldn't use the Wi-Fi antenna holes. This would be built into the I/O shield. You'd get your own, you plug it in like a laptop, basically. And this board specifically, if you want to Google it, if you want to build one of these, I think they still sell them. It's not that old. IRTech AD650i. Again, ignore the dust. You can see how much I'm a fan of putting an external power supply onto a standard computer case. But there you go. There's an answer for a single possibility that comes off the top of my mind that you should be able to fit into that. Heck, maybe I should buy one and do something with that motherboard, because that's been my hesitation. I have to source a 19 volt power supply. What I ended up doing to make the motherboard prep video is I borrowed one from another Minisforum mini PC, a powerful one, you know, that uses a 19 volt laptop power brick. And then I thought, what kind of case is going to take that? So your question there sort of answers my question, which is, what am I supposed to do with this thing? Because any other case is going to be left with a big gaping hole where a power supply goes, right? If I just put that in a mini ITX case, it'll fit, but then there's going to be a hole for a power supply that remains empty. So I'm like, what do I build in? So I think you and I just helped each other out. All right. Well, that's why I love the back and forth here in our chat room. So thank you for that question. I didn't even know I had a question, or I forgot about it. That's why there's so much dust on that. LRCX in the chat room wants to know, I'm cleaning an Alienware laptop that had soda spilled and dried in it. Every key and printed panel had to come out to clean. I couldn't even type in the password before. Wish me luck. Yeah, I mean, that can go either way. You might get lucky and cleaning it thoroughly, make it work again. It depends if it was on. If the machine was turned on when it was spilled, then something might have shorted out. If it was off or immediately turned off after the spill, there is a much better chance of success. So let us know how that goes. Douglas Purcell says, was that the power supply listed below? Listed below what? The case? Oh, there is a power supply there. Let's take a look. I didn't even notice that. This one here, I guess. This is 12 volts. We need, I believe, 19 volts. They're pretty common. I mean, they're not hard to find. 19 volt. It just depends how many watts you want. And we also have to make sure we get the right size barrel jack, but they're everywhere. These are cheaper ones. They're going to be lower voltage. So depending on what kind of voltage your motherboard's going to need, you know, as a home theater PC or HT-PC, like this is for a monitor, but it likely might just be fine. The motherboard manufacturer will say on the website what size barrel connect. Like this one has a bunch of adapters. I'm not a fan of these because the adapters fall off or people lose them. Best to just get a proper power supply like this that has enough wattage, right? It's going to be 19 volts, and the question is how many watts. I would guess 120 to 200 watts would probably be enough. If you wanted overkill, you could go 300 watts, and then it'll only use up to it doesn't, a 300 watt power supply doesn't run 300 watts. It runs up to 300 watts. In the same way your car speedometer might go to 120 miles an hour. That's up to. It's not the standard speed all the time. So we got to make sure the diameter of the barrel connector, the millimeters of how wide it is correct to fit into the plug. Again, the motherboard manufacturer, like IRTech, would specify that. So just looking during a live video, there's a 300 watt, I mean, for 22 bucks, oh, it's $10 shipping. I was going to say it should probably cost 40 or 50 bucks. See, that's only 60 watts. That's not enough. Go up to my original search results. 65, 300 watts. No, I don't want to. You could use a plug like this, by the way. I don't want one like that. I would want one that's a separate brick personally. And it would probably be this one here or one similar. So by clicking on this, we might see some suggestions. Like people who looked at this also looked at these other things. 65, 90 watts, maybe enough. I don't know. I'd rather get more than I need just for that reason. And then, you know, make sure the barrel connector is the right size and the polarity, you know, is the center positive or is the outside of the barrel positive? So all of that needs to be checked. That's why I was a little upset that Minisforum, at least IRTech with that particular motherboard, did not include it. So I'm like, oh, now I got to do all the research. Thanks a lot. That's why it is set uncompleted. Okay, again, thank you for the questions. I do appreciate them. Megan says, I want to see him build a PC with that case. You know, for 30 bucks and we got the board, I think after the show I'll order it. And then I'll just have to figure out, I'll do the research from IRTech to figure out which power brick I need. Or I'll find a power brick from a Minisforum here that works and just order another one of those. But Minisforum doesn't make or sell the power bricks. You have to get them from the power brick makers. That's why you always see me grab a silver Sharpie and write on the power brick which computer it's for, because they all look alike and you don't want to mix them up. Ghostly Lurker said, excuse me, said I went through 3 of those adapter ones and the tip I needed kept snapping because it was so thin. Yeah, I stay away from the adapters. That's so 1970s. Smiley Matt says to Black Tornado, who asked about that other case, he likes the A09 or A09M. They have better ventilation. The non-M is a full-length PCI slot. A09, who makes, is that the same maker? I don't know. I like the Goodseri. I like the look of it. But apparently it's called an HTPC case versus an ITX case, even though an ITX or really any computer can be used as a home theater PC. The idea behind calling it a home theater PC is that it's small, unobtrusive, it can go next to the TV without distracting you from the TV, that it should be quiet and sort of not seen. It's there, but nobody's really noticing it's there. Versus a bigger computer may be louder or more noticeable and distracting away from the home theater experience. So I think that's not really an official definition. Okay, yeah, Goodseri A09, I see that here. That's a lot more money. That's $46. It looks quite a bit bigger. And that's called an SPCC desktop computer case. They are not promoting it as an HTPC, which makes sense because you wouldn't necessarily want all the connectors in the front. Let me share this with you. But everybody's got your preference, but just know you have choices. I guess that's the thing to take away from this, if you like one over the other. I don't know, that's a little industrial for me to be sitting out by my TV, me personally. And I wouldn't need the slot, because if I'm hooking it up to the TV as a home theater PC, presumably we're streaming Netflix and YouTube VLC, in which case, you know, you could just buy a freaking Fire Stick and be done with it. Because these days, a Fire Stick is way cheaper, and it adds all the smart functionality to any TV, whether you have a smart TV or not. This turns it into a smart TV, and now you've got YouTube, and now you can put VLC on it and browse your media if you have your own media you want to watch. You don't need a whole computer. You just have this little stick and this remote. So I kind of feel like for that reason, the whole concept of home theater PCs no longer makes any sense, when for $30 you can get this whole basically media PC in the stick, preloaded with Amazon software, where you can watch Amazon Prime, Netflix, Paramount Plus, or again, go to their app store, download the free VLC, and browse your own media on your network or attached, because you can plug a USB drive into one of your computers, for example, and put it on the network and put all your media on there. You can plug a USB drive into the back of your router on most routers and share it over your network. And now you've got a NAS and you've got an HTPC for $30 in the price of an external drive. I mean, you're paying for the storage anyway if you're hosting your own stuff. So I just think HTPCs are kind of a thing of the past. However, I do have the board. I still haven't, until just now, figured out what case to use that isn't going to have a big gaping hole where a power supply goes. Since I've got the parts, I could finish that build. I just don't know what I'll do with it. But these are the hiccups you run into when building a home theater PC. You run into these weird, unusual power supplies or power supply-less cases where the power supply is external, and you get into all this weirdness. And you say, well, it's worth it because at the end I have a PC no one will see next to my TV. But then just get the Fire Stick, no one will see that, it's even smaller. And you don't have to provide additional power to it. Usually it just runs right off a USB port on the TV. And if you don't have a USB port on a TV, it just uses a regular cell phone charger. That's it, that's all there is. All right, but again, appreciate the awareness here and letting me know about that case, and that there are options. Rembinus says, have you seen any more about Windows 12? Have you? Have you seen anything about Windows 13 or 14? Anything more about the Martians on Mars? You're asking me about something that, as far as I know, does not exist in any form. But if you know something I don't, please share it with me. John Paul Bacon, also some HT PCs, he says, would have an optical drive for playing music CDs, DVDs, and Blu-ray. Not today, they don't. No. Sony just announced they're not going to make Blu-ray anymore. LG has dropped out. Panasonic has dropped out. I believe everybody's dropped out. So I think you're referring to what HTPCs that you're defining as an HTPC 10 or more years ago had. That's, people are simply not buying as many CDs, DVDs, or that vinyl albums or cassette tapes. You can still buy them, but the vast majority of the population is not. What people are doing today, more and more, are streaming their media. Services like Spotify, Pandora, which are free with commercials, or they're taking their CDs or their Blu-rays and they're ripping them onto their local storage, so they're still not using the discs because the discs wear and tear and they get scratched, and you want to keep your disc pristine, right? So the way you can do that is to rip it and put the disc back in the case and put it away as a backup. I used to do that in the 80s when I bought records. The first thing I did when the record and the vinyl was brand new is I would record it onto a cassette tape and put the vinyl back in the sleeve and put it away. Then I wear and tear on the cassette tape that cost $1. And when the cassette tape was worn out, I'd put a new cassette, take the vinyl, play it for the second time, record it again to the new cassette. That way my vinyl stayed scratch-free. And for the same reason, CDs, DVDs, and Blu-rays are no different. They scratch up, and then they become unplayable, or they stutter and they skip. And people just aren't buying them anymore. I mean, some people are, but the bulk of people stopped buying them years ago. And for that reason, it's going to get almost impossible to find any new Blu-ray or optical drives other than what's already been made. Once the existing inventory sells out, the companies aren't making any profit selling something people aren't buying. So enjoy it while you can, and if you feel like you never want to let that go and move on with the rest of us, maybe buy a couple extras to put away for the future. Unless you know how to build them. Paul Howe said he's very pleased with my Minisforum 795S7. That's this one here. So far so good, it'll replace my old all-day PC. I think this is a great machine, absolutely. But I didn't have this to compare it to until recently. Now, if I had to pick one, I don't know. I don't think you can go wrong with either decision. They're both Minisforum after all. Eisman says, according to Microsoft, Office 2016 and 2019 and 2021 will stop using certain parts of programs. I don't know what that means. If you have any links to anything that you're quoting, like if you're not writing this information and sourcing it yourself and you're believing what somebody else wrote, I'd like to know what your source is, because you might be reading from a very unreliable source, or you might be misunderstanding what it says. So if you want to cite something that somebody else said, please give us the source. If, on the other hand, you have your own theories and you want to share them with us, you're certainly welcome to. Just let us know it's your own theory, and instead of paraphrasing something that somebody else wrote that may not be accurate or you may not have understood correctly. We need to know where your source is. We're living in an age where there's so much false information. It's hard to know what's real from what's fake, and it's also hard to know how somebody has interpreted something. We see interpretation problems constantly in this industry and throughout life in general. What are you going to do? It's human nature. People tend to have a bias to, you can say something, you could say the exact same thing in the exact same way to two separate people, and one person heard one thing and one person heard something else. And which was the way you intended it? And how much control do you have over interpretation of the message? So always verify your source. And if you have any conclusions, maybe ask some questions before you come to your conclusion. Ask for a couple of opinions to help, you know, like an investigator would do. You think somebody did a crime, you got to ask some questions and ask some other people some questions and helps lead you to a more definitive line of factual, more likely factual information. At least that's how I choose to go through life, because it's way too easy now to fool people. People are as gullible as ever now. They can't tell what's real from what's fake, and their bank accounts are getting drained because of it. So I just want you guys to be protected out there and look out for yourselves. Support for Office 2016 and 2019 ends, I believe, on the same day Windows 10 support ends, October 14th of 2025. And Office 2021 gives you 1 more year. There is an Office 2024 and, of course, Microsoft 365. It's up to you. You don't have to use Microsoft products. You're not a victim of Microsoft. What cracks me up is I hear people talk about, oh, Microsoft makes all this money, so it's okay to steal from them. I bet there's somebody on this planet that has far less money than you have, so it's okay for them to steal from you? Because that's what you're saying. Well, Microsoft's always spying, and Microsoft, I don't care what your justification is, stop using the damn product. If you dislike it so much, go use something else. There's LibreOffice that's free. There's the Google applications that are the equivalent to the Word application and spreadsheet, Excel. Google has alternatives free for you to use. You don't want to use those? Then pay the money like everybody else. When the people complain about Microsoft, they're complaining about the most pirated software on the planet. So why are people pirating something they don't want? Use something else. You can go to Apple, you can go to Linux. You don't have to use, nobody's forcing you to use Microsoft. If you don't want to use Microsoft Office, oh, they're going to force us to buy something. They never force you to buy anything. You're voluntarily paying for that. Or you're voluntarily stealing it using whatever twisted justification. Theft is theft. You steal, you steal. Right? Just admit it. Don't make it out like you're Robin Hood. You're a thief. Don't make it out like it's a terrible product that you're turning around and stealing. Oh, that's completely worthless. Well, then why did you steal it? It obviously had some value to you. All right, so enough of that. I mean, I'm just tired of this nonsense on the internet. People aren't, they're talking out of one side of their mouth and then they're doing the exact opposite. This food is terrible, which is why I'm going to eat all of it. Why would you eat it if you didn't like it? That doesn't make any sense. There's other things to eat. That restaurant charges too much. Don't eat at that restaurant. Nobody held a gun to your head and said you had to eat there. Mecha Cameron said, that's a damn good build, dude. It went super fast. Well, the cooler slowed me down. I thought I'd have it done sooner, but more important, you get it done right. Pay attention to the details. The fan brackets threw me off. The thermal compound, you know, having to wipe that and clean it off shouldn't have happened, but, you know, it is what it is. And overall, because we already had the motherboard prepped, we had half the work already done. And because, and let this be a lesson to you, we're not dealing with liquid cooling, we're not dealing with RGB, and we're not dealing with a bunch of any fans, really, just on the CPU. And yet, our system runs cool. We have less cabling. Our parts are less expensive. We're not paying a premium tax for RGB. We don't have all those cables of RGB getting in the way. We don't have the hoses of a liquid cooler and the added expense of a liquid cooler, adding also to the weight and complexity of the build. You keep it simple, and you reduce your cost. You reduce difficulties in building and time involved in building, and your end product ends up being far easier to maintain because there's fewer parts to go wrong. Essential Working Towards is 3 hours fast. Well, we did finish this up about 45 minutes ago, and I've just been chatting with you. And then we spent, was it an hour just getting caught up? So it was about an hour and a half, which, you know, doing it live and interacting, if I chose to turn the camera off and not talk to anybody, and I focused on this, this is probably an hour job, maybe an hour and a half, but I don't think so unless I get a phone call or an interruption. That's what slows me down. But I'm not in a race. Like, I'm not trying to show you how fast it can be done. I'm showing you how right it can be done. And if you're not enjoying your build, then you're probably going to want to rush through it. And if you want to rush through it, maybe you shouldn't build it. Because if you're not enjoying it, just buy one already built. It's so much easier. It's not a contest, and anybody that's that competitive, I'm not interested. Like, if we're going to do a PC build race, then let's do that. But that's not what my videos are. They're about education. And if you speed through the education, a lot of your students are going to go right over their head too fast. Mecha Cameron says, I love Microsoft. I don't mind spending full price when I have to. I wouldn't spend full price. Like Microsoft MSRP, it's just like a car manufacturer. I wouldn't pay full price on whatever the sticker is on the car either. That's why I like SCD keys. You can go there and you can get the real actual product for a fraction of the price, and they stand behind it and guarantee it. So if you want to get Microsoft Office, you don't need to spend $500 from it. For it, you could spend anywhere from $26 for Office 2016, and even though it expires in October 15th, it's not going to stop working. You just won't get any more security updates. You can also get 2019, but that won't do you any good, right? And 2021 will get you an extra year, and then 2024, and each newer version costs more, so it might even go up to like $80 or something. I don't know. That's still a fraction of 500. Or the exact same product with the same support, all legit. You can call Microsoft and ask them, is this key legit? They'll verify it if you don't believe me. So then why does Microsoft charge $500? It's all the same way as any MSRP. Go to a jeweler sometime and ask how much the diamond is. I guarantee whatever price they're asking, you can come down off of that. I'm just saying. That's what it's worth, and we have a certificate to prove its authenticity, and they'll justify their price. But there's certain things in this world. Music albums may have an MSRP, and then you go into Walmart and see it's knocked down, 80%. That doesn't make it not legitimate. Paul House said the lack of RGB filled me with joy. All right, guys, I think that'll wrap it up for today. I don't see any other questions. Just want to double check. Mark Gaines says, great stream as always, Carey and Mar. Well, thank you, Mark. Rob Dvorak says, is there any temperature change with the cover on? Well, I'm not hearing the fan ramp up. Like, that's usually my indication is listening. But we can just check that real quick before we go. I don't think there'll be a temperature change, but what I think doesn't matter. What happens is what happens. Let's take a look at it. We go back over to the desktop and bring up our hardware info. We were idling around the low 30s before, right? If anything, it looks cooler now with the panel on. It's in the 20s now instead of the 30s. Jeez, that's impressive. You'd be hard-pressed to find a liquid cooler do better than that. Wow. There you go. You saw it with your own eyes, live, unscripted, unedited. I can't control what it's doing, so it is what it is. I'm impressed. I'm impressed. This is about as good as I could have expected. I would say it's better than I could have expected. I always hope for the best and plan for the worst. That's why I had the other cooler pre-ordered and ready to go today, because I had a feeling if I just replaced that fan that was on the other cooler, would that still allow enough room to put the panel on? And is the other cooler from Thermalright a better cooler, like as far as more effective? And it does appear to be. And for 35 bucks, 36 bucks, bargain all day long. That's a good deal. And it's quiet. Installation was easy. A little bit of confusion, not much though. And now that I'm familiar with it, that means adding anything else from Thermalright in the future should be a much easier process for me now that, you know, each manufacturer has their own personality, let's say. And that was my first introduction to them. And it went very well. Mecha Cameron says, sell me that. When Minisforum sends us these motherboards, and I've talked to you guys about it before, they come in a box that says, this is not for resale. They're often pre-production or prototype models that may vary depending on what you guys order, like when it gets released publicly. Sometimes they're not. It's sort of like if you buy a box of ice cream popsicles or whatever, ice cream sandwiches, and you look at the little package, it says not intended for resale, individual sale. What that means is if you're an ice cream truck and you go to the store, just the regular grocery store, and you buy a box of popsicles, and you take the popsicles out and you sell them individually, you know, you get the sticker on the side of your ice cream truck, you're not violating a law, but you're violating the policy and the terms and conditions of the sale. You're intended to buy wholesale product for resale. And I don't want Minisforum to be mad at me by selling something they sent us for review. Furthermore, we might want to do a follow-up review on this in 6 months' time and see how it's holding up. And if we don't have it anymore, we can't do that. And that's a heck of a way to say thank you to Minisforum. But what can happen is, say you have a problem with the board, and you contact Minisforum support or any other content creator who sold you a product they got for free. You don't know any better. You might have bought it off eBay. You don't even know the person who sold it was a content creator. And what you got was a prototype model that you're not supposed to have. So you reach out to support if you have to, and they want to know what's the serial number of that product. And they know what serial numbers went to marketing and what serial numbers were sold retail. And if that serial number went to marketing, I can tell you right now, you've got zero warranty. And then the follow-up question may be, where did you get that? And then the punishment will be, we're not sending that person any more free product because they're just selling it. And that makes us look bad when the product was not intended for retail consumption. And of course it has a problem. And now the customer's pissed at us when we're not the ones who did it, and the customer isn't supposed to have that. It's a big mess. But I would encourage you to build one of these. You saw how easy it was. You can buy the parts. They're listed in our parts description. Minisforum would be happy to have the sale. You can put it together yourself. It's very simple. You can buy the cooler, the RAM, and the storage from Amazon, where you have a full 30-day return. Cooler, RAM, storage, and power supply. That's it. And then you, in the case, put it together. It's super easy. You don't need to buy this one. Besides, for what it would cost me to ship it to you, it'd be cheaper for you to build it yourself by far. So for all of those reasons, that's a lot of reasons, but that's why we don't do that. Now, if we bought it with channel funds, different story. Then we're free to sell it, but again, it's probably going to cost you more in shipping, because you get free shipping from Minisforum and Amazon and Newegg. We have to pay full price for shipping. You got to hope it doesn't break in shipping. There's very little I can do to help you because you're so far away, wherever you are. And we could use that money then to funnel back into the channel for more projects, which is a great cycle if we could make that work. But again, only for products that we buy 100%, nothing that's given to us. It's just unethical and it's against the rules. Like pretty much universally, anybody, any manufacturer that sends you something for review, it is not intended for you to resell it. Just so you know. Can I raffle it? In the United States, there are contests, giveaways, lotteries, raffles, games of skill, games of chance. In every county and every state, there are laws regarding what the giveaway is worth. And then you have federal laws regarding tax collection of giveaways of a certain value and who is legally allowed to accept that kind of a gift. It varies from state to state. The legal definition in the United States of a raffle is where the proceeds go to a charity. I'm not a charity. So if I were to say buy a raffle ticket, everybody buys a raffle ticket for $5, and all those raffle tickets sold will cover the cost of this, and one lucky winner will get it. According to United States federal law, that raffle money must go to a registered charity, or you cannot call it a raffle. If it's a lottery, then it's a game of chance. If it's a contest, it may be a game of skill. And if it's a giveaway, so I don't want to get into all those legalities. So no, it's just not that easy. It's oversimplifying the complexities of the contest versus giveaways versus lotteries. You know, how is a McDonald's Monopoly game that's free with your purchase of a meal during whenever they do that different than a lottery ticket? And how come children can participate? Where children can't participate in the lottery, you got to be a certain age. And McDonald's has gone to court over this many times. They've been sued. I don't have that kind of money to defend myself in court, just trying to give something away. It's not worth it. That's the world we live in today. That's for big corporations to deal with who have attorneys. So there are reasons, and it's not just because I don't want to. There's consequences. You know, there's an expression, no good deed goes unpunished. Some of the biggest arguments I've gotten in with people are people who got something for free and didn't get everything they expected, or they had a problem with it and they were expecting a replacement. Could be 6 months after they got it. And now I'm a bad guy because I sold them something bad. Like, it's just, and then you mess with the laws and the you know, what's allowed for resale and versus review product versus a purchase product. It's very, very complicated, and it typically ends in somebody being pissed off. Pissed off they didn't win. Their manufacturer's pissed off. We sold something we weren't supposed to sell. The person who wins is pissed off they didn't get everything they thought, or they didn't get it fast enough, or they got a problem now, and you're told, hey, no warranty. Well, you didn't say that in the giveaway. Oh man, there's some punishment awaiting if you want to go down that road. And if you want to ask me how I know, I got stories. You waiting for me to wrap it up?
You can do whatever you choose.
What are you up to?
I would like to remind you to mention the forum.
The forum. We have, Mara has set up a bulletin board where you guys can leave messages, ask for help, talk to one another. It's open 24/7, available to all of you for free. We have no intention to monetize this. The way you get to it is you just type in CareyHolzman.boards.net. You'll see it's right up there here. And that's going to take you to this website that looks like this. And as you can see, I'm not currently logged in, and you don't have to be to read, but you will need to be logged in to post. So here under general discussion, you can see we've got a number of our viewers already joined in discussions. They're listed from top to bottom on what has been the most recent activity. And you can see it's been pretty busy, just brand new out of the gate. We'd love to see you guys join in. It's completely free. We don't ask for a credit card or anything like that. You just register to create your own account. We'd love to see a picture of you so we have a face to a name. You don't have to. It's just a nice thing to connect us. And like, here's a message from somebody. Hiatus, what does this say? Team.
That's the calendar. I've been testing the calendar.
Oh, that's you.
Yes.
So Mara's in there constantly responding to people's questions, and we encourage you to respond to each other's questions. Like Bikeman here wants to know about moving his computer into a different case, and you'll see Jim KJ3N contributes a comment. There's a response. There's Mecha Cameron in there, and you know, being able to put faces to your names helps us understand who we're talking. Are we talking to a child? Are we talking to a teenager? Are we talking to a man? Are we talking to a woman? This makes a difference to me because clearly how we speak to people depends on how we see them. And if I only see a name on the screen, it's hard to know. Am I talking to somebody with much life experience? Generally, the older somebody is, the more life experience they have, generally.
Can I rephrase that?
Yeah.
Gender does not matter. What matters is if we're able to put a face to a name, we feel like we have involved you in a part of our family, and we can fund however you choose.
Gender only
Whether it's
matters when it comes.
humorous, whether it's with facts.
We have a member named Alhej. I think that's how his name is pronounced.
Mhm.
I say his name. I don't really know. I'm making
Why
an
does it
assumption.
matter?
It matters if I'm offending. I mean, I'm sure they'd tell me, but
Of course.
I would feel better if I knew to use the proper pronoun. And not just because of the way we are today, but this is the way I've always
And
been.
that's something you can share or choose not to.
Yeah, you don't have to, but we encourage it. We'd love to see you. But that being said, it's totally up to you.
And of course, besides the threads that folks are more than welcome to post and answers, questions, comments, feedback, whatever it is that you want to share, I do post threads that I believe are important, at least for us and for you. We love your feedback. We want to hear your feedback. It's very, very important to us. So we want to hear what you guys have to say. You female, whoever it is that chooses to respond, please respond, because we enjoy your feedback, we want your feedback, and we want to know what your thoughts are. It's very, very important to us. And so, like I said, I test some of the features. I was playing with the calendar feature today. I will be posting some additional threads probably in just a moment or to get your feedback on some very important subjects that are required for us to have some idea on evolution and moving forward and what it is that you all want to see. Your feedback is very.
Yeah, I mean, you can't complain about the content if you haven't spoken up about what you want.
Right.
Although just because you want it doesn't mean we're going to do it. But if enough people show interest, then absolutely, obviously, we're going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, you guys get the opportunity to see me. I'm not a person who is a fan of anybody who makes videos never showing their face. And if I see content where the content creator does not show their face, I don't trust that content creator at all. People hiding is, for me, whatever excuse they're using, if they feel like they need to hide because, oh, security, then maybe they shouldn't be a content creator. I don't care who it is or what the subject matter is. There's all kinds of content creators who don't show their faces. And in much the same way, we have a lot of participants. There's no way for you to show your faces. And that's the only reason why I'd like to see your face. It's just a preference. And if you don't want to show your face, that you don't have to. But it helps me understand who I'm talking to. It helps me connect to you in the way that you are connecting to me, that you wouldn't be able to if I wasn't showing my face. All right, that's the whole bottom line there. So the forums are free. They're always available 24/7, every day of the year. And again, we have no plans to monetize that. We hope you'll take advantage of it, and we hope that you'll engage each other in conversation there, whether it's problem solving or decision making. What parts should I buy? That's the place to ask versus a live video. You're always welcome to reach out to us personally if you want to know. Maybe we've got a build you want to buy, something that we built, that we paid for, and you want to know what it's going to cost. Well, it depends on what customizations you want, and it depends on where you live and how much the shipping is going to cost. We don't do that on a live video. That's a private conversation. So even the forums wouldn't necessarily be the right place for that. What you should do is just send us an email to showcasecreate@gmail.com. Mara will answer your emails typically within 24 hours. So if you've used that email address and you've not received a response in 24 hours, there's a good chance you spelled that email incorrectly. So double check the spelling on it. Go very slow. I know a lot of you use text-to-speech and you're not proofreading what's coming out. And you got to proofread. If you don't proofread, you're not being understood. Or we may not get the message at all in the case of an email address. So type it out. Go slow. Type it out. If it matters that much to you to send it, don't you want to make sure you're sending it to us and not somebody else? It's very easy to do. If you're going to use text-to-speech, always proofread before you send your message and make the corrections. Otherwise, you might as well be talking baby talk, because we don't know what you're saying half the time when you do that. So I'm sure there's a future where text-to-speech will be more accurate than it is today. You just need to turn closed captions on this video to see just how bad YouTube gets the translation. A super thank you to our friends at Minisforum for sending us the board for review. And again, to all of our members and supporters, folks like Buster and Oystein and Frankie B and Paul Gray, Mark Gaines and Luke Greenia, Without your contributions and without your memberships, we couldn't have made this video today. We'd have the motherboard, but we wouldn't be able to do anything with it. So thanks as well to all of you who make these videos possible. Of course, Tamara, who works tirelessly in the background doing all of our channel administration, which is a full-time job. And thanks to all of you, regardless, for hanging out and interacting with us. We're trying to make videos that are about community. If you just want commercials, there's plenty of that on YouTube where it's just no involvement from you at all. We're trying to be different. And if you don't see the value of that, this isn't the channel for you. We're not going to change. We're going to continue to encourage community interaction, specifically on the forums and in our live chat. We want to talk with you, even if we don't agree with you. We want to have that interaction. And I do think this is the future of media. You'll see more and more the interaction is going to be a much more important part than just a one-way podcast where you're just listening passively. That's the same essentially as a commercial. You have no opportunity to interject. You're just being bombarded with information, whether you like it or not. With me, you have the ability to respond to that and give me your thoughts. And there's just not too many places that do that. And in my opinion, that's the whole point of YouTube. Otherwise, you might as well watch TV. All right, that'll wrap it up for me for today. Our friends over at SCD Keys, 30% off if you need a Microsoft, Windows, or Office. And it's all 100% legal, legit. It's what I use in my business, and I can't take that lightly. I'm not going to lose my business over saving a few dollars for my customer. It's my customer's money. If I want to sell them a $500 license and they want to buy it, but I don't want to do that. I want to save them money. So it's all legal. It's not worth me losing my business over for a few dollars. And of course, if you remain leery, don't buy it. Like, no one's forcing you to. If you have another source that you'd prefer, this is not for you. Okay. For everyone else, they have support. The keys are guaranteed. And there's the 30% off coupon code to save you even more money. All I'm trying to do is save you money. That's going to wrap it up for me for today. I hope you guys have a great weekend. I know our friend Mitch has a little road trip going on, and hopefully he has a good trip there. He's got a dad joke. What do you call a herd of wealthy cows? The 2%. Ouch. All right, guys. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you all again very, very soon. Thank you for your memberships. Thank you for your support. Thank you, most importantly, for your friendship. Until next time, bye for now.